Hey guys, welcome to this new tutorial series where we're going to be building a full stack application with Django and Next.JS. So we're going to be building out a marketing manager application or website that will be powered by a REST API that we'll create using the Django REST framework. And with that API, we can be able to pull in that data onto a Next.js frontend and we display it on a landing page. So we'll also be able to capture a user's email and save that to our Django backend. So over here we have the Django admin where we can add new campaigns, and those campaigns can be seen on the Next.js frontend. So over here I'm going to come in here and add a new campaign. So I'm going to choose an image. So let me choose this one right here, and I'm just going to say new and latest. So we'll have a field called slug, and also something about the images. These images are going to be uploaded to Cloudinary, which is a media service. So if we want to store images, videos from our application, so Cloudinary provides us with the resources, and also they enable us to do different transformations on that media directly from our application. So it's a pretty cool service. So you're going to be seeing how to integrate it with Django, and they have a specific Python module that we can use. So down here we have a slug. So every time we create a campaign, it's going to have a unique slug. Now you notice that this is basically the title here, but it's separated by the dashes. So we're going to be looking at the Django slug field and how we can create slugs. So notice that the slug has to be created from a title, meaning that the user has to supply a title and then the slug can be created. So over here I'm going to put a test description. I'm just going to go to the Next.js sites and copy some of their marketing stuff. So we also can track page visits and how many successful submissions we got, but we won't be getting much into this. Instead, I will show you how to set up Google Analytics to track which people visit the site after we launch it. So I'm going to go ahead and save here. So when we save, we can see that a new one was added, and when we click on it, you can see that it got a slug assigned. And now on our Next.js frontend, so on our Next.js site, you can see that the campaign was added. And if we come back over here, you can see that now we have it here and the slug was assigned. So on the Django REST framework, we're going to be seeing how to override the model save method to be able to generate the slug based on the title. And then we are going to build out a REST API that can be consumed from Next.js. You might be wondering why Next.js, why not just build this with the templates that Django provides. So I'm here on the Next.js features. Now what stands out mostly is the static site generation feature, and this allows us to generate all the HTML pages at build time with its data. So whenever we deploy and the user is trying to request for the website, the HTML with the data will already be generated, and it gives us a fast and a better experience in general. So Next.js is actually a React framework. So you're going to need to know a bit of React to get started here. So if you have any experience building applications using Create React App, whenever you build the application for production, the whole application is bundled into one JavaScript file, and that makes it very terrible for search engine optimization, as it is not easy for search engine crawlers to crawl sites that are powered by JavaScript. So Next.js solves that issue up front. And yeah, so we're going to be exploring the framework. We will cover most of these features here. So if you're excited about building this application, be sure to subscribe, and I'll talk to you in the next video. Hey guys, welcome back. So let's go ahead and get started building our project. So we are going to need to have Python installed on our computer, and also we are going to need to have Node.js. So Python enables us to work with our Django backend, since Django is a Python framework, and Node.js gives us access to NPM. So we'll be using NPM to manage our project dependencies, including Next and all the libraries that we need to have our Next.js frontend to work. So be sure to have Node.js installed and to also have Python installed. So in this one, I'm going to be working on Windows, but if you're working on a Mac, the process is going to be similar. You might have to do things a bit differently. If there's something that is specific to macOS or Linux, I will be mentioning it before we continue. So I have a folder on my computer called projects. So over here, I'm going to create a new folder. So this is going to contain all our project code. So I'm going to call this campaign. So I'm going to call this campaign manager. So inside here, remember we are going to be having Django on the back end and Next.js on the front end. So we are going to have to maintain two different projects, the Next.js front end and the Django backend. So I'm going to create a folder for the front end. So new folder, call this front end, and also the one for the backend. So we're going to be working in the backend for all the Django stuff, and we're going to be working on the front end for all the Next.js stuff. So I'm going to open the whole folder, the one that's containing all these projects, in VS Code. So I'm going to be using VS Code as a text editor for the project. I recommend you use VS Code, but if you're already familiar with another text editor or IDE and you know how to navigate your way around it, then be sure to stick with that. But if you get problems with the environment, you can switch to VS Code, and it's pretty simple to use it. So I'm going to open this in VS Code. So on Windows, once you install VS Code, you're going to have the open with VS Code added to your menu when you right click. And this is what I'm going to click. So that's going to go ahead and open up in VS Code. It should open up here. So here we go. All right. So VS Code comes with an integrated terminal. So we're going to pull that one up because we're going to need to run some commands to install some things. Okay, so I'm going to cd into the backend. So we will start working with Django right away. And here, what we want is we want to create a virtual environment inside the backend. So to create a virtual environment, you're going to be using the virtual env module. So you should be able to get that by typing in pip install virtual env. So that's going to go ahead and make sure we have it. So on Mac or Linux, if you have Python 2 still installed, you might have to run this using pip3 install virtual env. And once we have that, we can use virtual env to create our virtual environment where our backend project will live. So here you can see that we're in the backend folder, and I'm going to create a virtual environment by writing virtual env. Then the name of the virtual environment, in our case, I'm going to use venv. This is an arbitrary name, so you can call it anything, just something you can remember. So venv. And when I run that, we have a venv folder added to our backend, and in there we can go ahead and now activate it. So to activate it on Windows, I'm going to expand it just so we see what is there. So we have the lib and the script. So the script is what contains what we care about. So we care about the activate script. For us to activate our virtual environment, we want to execute the activate script. So this activate.bat. So what you can do here is we can run the venv, and then we want to run activate. So I'm going to put this slash like this. So I'm going to click enter there. And once we run that, you can see that our virtual environment is now activated, and we can tell that by looking at the name here. You'll notice that when we create a virtual environment, we get pip installed, we get pip setup for us, and Python setup. So if you're on Mac or Linux, then you don't want to run that, but you want to run source, then the name of the virtual environment. You don't have the scripts folder, but you have bin, and then there is activate. So I'm going to leave the command on the screen. So now, assuming we have the virtual environment set up, we can go ahead and install Django and create a Django backend. So let's install Django by using pip. So pip install Django. I'm also going to get the Django REST framework just because we are already here. So let's get the Django REST framework. And by the way, if you're new to the Django REST framework, this is a very powerful Python module that we use to build REST APIs for Django. So it's like an add-on to Django that makes you make any kind of REST API. So let's go ahead and get Django REST framework. Also on the Django REST framework site, they recommend you get Markdown and Django filter. So Django REST framework comes with the browsable API. And for it to work well, we need to have Markdown installed. For Django filters, this can be used if you want to have filtering or searching. So let's also bring it in. We might use it. I'm not sure, but we'll find out. So let's go ahead and install this. Okay, so now that the installation is done, we can now create our Django project. So whenever we install Django, we get access to the tool called Django admin, and that can enable us to bootstrap the Django project. So let's run Django admin. So Django-admin. We want to run start project like this. So then we give it the project name. So in this case, I'm going to call the project CM backend, since it's going to be the backend. And then I'm going to want it to create all the boilerplate files just inside the backend folder. So I don't want it to create another extra folder. So I'm going to put a dot at the end, and then I'm going to run that. And by the way, we need to change how we are naming it, so it shouldn't have these special characters. So let's run that. And once we run that and we go back to our backend, you can see that now we have manage.py, and also we have our main project files. So let's start our Django server now by running Python manage.py run server. Alright, so once we run that, you're gonna quickly see that our server has started. So let me open it up in Chrome, which is pretty cool. It actually opened in another browser. Anyway, so now that we have Django, we are gonna focus on just putting off all the Django functionalities we need. But first we need to add REST framework to our installed app section. So I'm gonna copy this from the documentation. And in settings.py, we want to make sure we add it. And that's how Django knows about all its functionalities. So right here, after we include all the prior Django apps, we add REST framework. For now, our application is going to be pretty simple. We are going to have only one app that's going to be managing the campaigns. So here, I'm going to stop the server and we create an app. So I'll do Ctrl+C. So when I run Python manage.py, start app, and then the name of the app. So for this one, I'm going to call it campaigns. And once we run that, then we get the campaigns app created. It has all the Django app files. So inside the campaigns, we are going to start by working in the models. So we'll have two models. One of those models is going to be managing the campaigns themselves. So if maybe you have a conference coming up, that's going to be a campaign. And also we are going to have another model that's going to manage the subscribers, and those would be the people who opt in for updates about specific campaigns. So let's create a model for our campaigns. So class campaign. So with Python, we want to make sure that our class names are singular and they start with a capital letter. So we want to import from models.model because that's how we get the Django model stuff. Okay, so here we're going to now describe the fields that we're going to need on our model. Each campaign is going to have a title, a slug, a description, and the created that and updated that fields, and also a logo. So let's start by setting up the title. And we are not using translations. This underscore that you saw autocomplete, you can use it if you want to translate the messages, but we are not going to be doing that. Let's keep things simple, and we only set the max length. So max length for the title, our titles can actually be big, so let's set it to 200, and let's also have a description. So the description is going to be a text field, so that way we don't have a specific limit on the description that a campaign can have. Another thing we're going to have is the slug. So this is going to be a human readable unique identifier of our campaign. Now there is a slug field built into Django, so models slug field, and since it's going to be created from the titles, that means that its max length is going to be slightly above this. So we'll be like replacing spaces with dashes. So let's make it like 255. All right. So now that we have our slug, let's go ahead and also have created that and updated that fields. So for the created that, we need auto now add to be true. So whenever we create a new campaign, this should be inserted automatically using the current time on our server. So this is going to be created at, and also let's have updated that. Whenever we update it, we are going to set the updated that to the current time on our server when it gets updated. So in addition, we set auto now add to true, and on update, then we set auto now to true. So that's going to do it for our normal fields. Now our other field is going to be managing our logo, which we are going to be saving in Cloudinary. So Cloudinary already has a model field that it ships with, and whenever we use that, we can pretty much get all the upload functionality directly from the Django admin. So I'm going to go here just so I can show you the module for Cloudinary if you need to do future references. So in Cloudinary, we need to set up an account, and then we can get credentials to access our account from our applications. Actually, I'm just going to log in with my existing account. Don't worry. So I'm just going to log in here with my existing account. So whenever you log in, you're going to have your credentials here. So you guys can see these credentials here. And here, this is the Python SDK I was talking about. So you can quickly see that they don't only allow storage, but they also allow transformations. You can at runtime request like different variations of an image, and the Cloudinary APIs would go ahead and work on that for you. Right here, we have an example of how to upload from Python using the Cloudinary module, which we're going to install. But we want to be doing it like this. Like I said, since we are going to be uploading from the Django admin, the model we set up will allow everything to work out of the box. So I'm going to go to our terminal and we're going to install Cloudinary. So pip install Cloudinary like this. And when we have Cloudinary in our project, we need to configure it. So we need to set up Cloudinary settings. So the settings are going to be like this cloud name of ours and also the API keys and the API secret. So when you sign up, you're going to have this. Now to set Cloudinary up, once we installed it, you can see it installed. You want to go to our settings.py. So in our CM backend, we want to go to settings, and up here we need to import Cloudinary. All right, and anywhere in settings. So I'm just gonna go even just after we import it. Then you can say Cloudinary. Then we want to call config. So config, and you want to pass the cloud name, the API key, and then the API secret. So the values for this will be what you have here. So you have the cloud name, the API key, and then the API secret. You can toggle this. You can reveal to see what the secret is, or you can click the copy to clipboard and then make sure these. So the cloud name, API key, and the secret. You can use those here. Okay. So one thing that you will probably notice up front is that this is very crucial information. In fact, even in Cloudinary, they don't even show it to people that are around you, especially the API key. So you don't really want to expose this to your version control if you push it to GitHub or Git. So what you want to do is you want to use environment variables to get this. So inside our backend, I'm going to create a .env. So .env, and I'm also going to create a .env sample file. And I'm going to talk about this in a minute. This is going to contain all your secrets that you don't want to push to version control. Now, whenever you're pulling some things from your own environment and someone is trying to run this application, maybe they clone it from Git and they are trying to run it, the application is not going to run because the application will be depending on these environment configs that will not be in the code. So what we always want to do is we want to set up a sample file where we can dictate the things they are going to need to set up for their project to work well. That's why you see this. Now I'm going to set the secret. So here, let's set this inside the environment. So I'm going to copy this and here. So when you define a .env that's going to run in Linux, you can define your variables by prefixing them with the export keyword. So you want to make them constants. So let's do cloud name, or let's also have cloud API key. So, and also let's have the API secret exported to. And why you want to prefix everything with cloud is because in your regular application, you might have other API secrets. So you can just prefix this to differentiate them from your other API keys that may have a similar name. So let's go ahead and save this. Make sure whenever you do this, you insert your correct values that you get from the dashboard in Cloudinary. And once you have everything set up, then inside settings.py, now we can use the OS module to get access to those environment variables. So I'm going to import OS. And down here, what we want to do is we want to do os.environ, want to do .get, then the keys. So the key for the cloud name is cloud name, very creative. So I'm gonna get this. Let's also do the same thing for the API key and also the API secret. So in .env, let's copy the keys, make sure they are matching. Copy the secret, make sure it's matching. So once we have this, then we need to update our terminal to know about our environment file. So for example, if we went and printed this, so I'm gonna copy and print up here. So I can do print, then I'll just do this. So that's what we wanna print. So at the end, I'm going to try to print the cloud name. So let me set it to some values just so we can see what's going on. So now if we try to run back our application, so I'm gonna do run server. I notice that it's none, and it actually tries to get it twice. So if it doesn't get it first time, it retries. So what we want is to make sure that we can pick it. So we can pick a D here. So for us to be able to make it work, so if you're in Linux or Mac, you can use the source keyword and then you type .env like this. And then that's going to be able to work. But notice when I run it on Windows, so if I type it in Windows, you can see that it doesn't really understand it. So what we want is in Windows, we can't really use export, but rather we use set. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to duplicate this file and I'm going to rename this to be env.bat. So BAT is an executable file that we can execute it with the contents from the terminal, from the command line. So instead of us using export, then we are going to be using set instead. So this is what works on Windows. So we can do set. And you can see VS Code actually understands the syntax. So now that we have that, then what we can do is we need to bring it in, just like on Mac you would do source something. But here what you can do is you're going to use the keyword call, and then you call env.bat like this. So when we run that, you can see that we didn't get any error. And what we can do now is run back our server. And now when it comes back, you can see that now we have the environment variables being read here, which is pretty cool. So now that we are done reading from our virtual environment on both Windows and Linux, and by the way guys, if you guys get any specific issues relating to this, feel free to ask in the comments. I'm sure people are going to help you out. So whenever we do this, what you want is you want to update your .env sample. So you can come over here and make sure that someone is going to need to have this. So here, this is just an example file. So we just need to make it able for someone to quickly tell what we need here. But we can expand more on this from the a README, just so people get to know what exactly they need to do. But for now, this is gonna do. So let's have just some placeholders here and here. Okay. So now what you can do is in our model.py, so models.py, then we can set up the logo or the image. So the logo, it's gonna be a Cloudinary field. So when we install Cloudinary, we need to import it. So we can do from Cloudinary.models import. So we wanna import Cloudinary field. So when we have Cloudinary field, that's one set for the logo. So over here we can set up some configurations. So we can have a name, then we can have other configs. So the configs I'm gonna pass in is overwrite. So overwrite equals true. So overwrite true means that whenever we had uploaded, let's say, a similar file with the same path, and we are now trying to upload a file with a similar path, then we should go ahead and replace the previous one. But we can also set the formats to like JPEG, because JPGs are actually more lightweight, so we can be transforming every image we upload to a JPEG. But feel free to examine the documentation. I know sometimes it can be very daunting to read this documentation, but this is going to be your friend, because on our side we are only covering like a very small fraction of what Cloudinary does. Now that we have our model field set up, then we can set up the class meta. So let's have class meta, and in the class meta we can specify how we want our model to behave. So we're going to specify an ordering. So the ordering, and we want to order the dates. We want to order by the create date, but in descending order. So we can say created date, but then in descending order. So we want to put a minus at the start. So the items that are created later are the ones that are going to be shown first when we do the first query. And this is also very useful if you want to like add pagination. So let's also set the .str. So it is used in the Django admin, and we'll get there. We'll actually expand on this and improve what we see in the Django admin. So let's just return the title here. Okay. So another thing we are going to have to specify is, notice how we have the slug field, and the slug field is not provided by the user, but rather it's created from the title. So what we want is we want to override the model save method. So whenever we are creating the campaign, we want to create a method that generates the slug depending on the title that is going to be saved at that point in time. So down here, we are going to override save. So def save. So every model you create implements this method. Now we can override it, which means that we can customize how it behaves when it is being executed. So it takes in self args and quags. Is we want to create the slug depending on the title. So I'm just going to create the simple variables here step by step so we can see what's going on. So I'm going to say to assign, then we want to slugify. We want first slugify. So in Django, so we have a function called slugify and we're going to import it in a minute. So we're going to slugify the title that's being saved at this point in time. So if a user was specifying a title like the story of my startup, it's going to replace all the spaces in that with minus signs and also transform everything to lowercase. So that's what it does behind the scenes. So let's import it actually. Let's go here, import slugify, and this should be templates. So from Django template, default filters, import slugify, and then we can use slugify here. I wonder why my quags is complaining. We're going to find out about that. Now that we've created our slug from the title, so one thing you should notice is on our front end, we use the slugs to make the query to the server. So the slugs have to be unique. So in this case, the title doesn't have to be unique, but the slug has to be unique. What we need to do is we need to make sure, we need to first check if the slug we just got already exists in the DB. And then if it already exists, then we are going to try to regenerate it using another function. So here we can check if campaign, wanna call objects, wanna filter by the slug. So wanna say if the slug equals the one to want to assign, we can check exists actually. So dot exists. So if it exists, the logic we are gonna use here is we are gonna be appending at the end the number of the items in the DB, because we are sure that the number of items in the DB will always increment once we add one. So now we can query for the number of items and then we append maybe a number at the end, and that's gonna make it unique. So to do that, we want to reassign to assign. So now to assign will be to assign, and then we want to add there the count of our objects in the DB. So I'm actually gonna get this plus, so that returns, our query is gonna return a number. So we wanna transform that into a string, and we are gonna just query by for all. We are gonna query for all. All right, and then we wanna add a count at the end. So dot count. So that means that if we had like 50, then our slug is going to be something like my event 50, my event 51, if the titles are the same. So now that we have the slug, we can set it to the value of our slug on the model instance, and then we can let the Django continue to handle the save. So what you can do here is you can do self.slug equals the to assign, and we are saying equals, for you're putting dash. Okay. So now that we have set the value of the slug, then we can let Django to continue and handle the save. So we can just send it back to the superclass. In this case, it's a Django Modules model. Okay. So now that we are done with assigning this, then let's go ahead and create the model for our subscriptions. So whenever someone opts in to be notified about these campaigns, so basically what that happens is, let's say it's an event and an event has tickets coming up. If there are some discounts running, those can be notified to the subscribers. So for us to do something like that, we need to have the subscribers or people who opted in. So here, let's have another class to handle the subscriptions. So class subscriber. Remember, there's no objections to how we name the classes, the model classes. So it has to be a valid Python class name. So models, then we want to call .model. So we are going to associate each subscriber to a campaign. So we're going to set up the foreign key. So let's have the campaign already. So campaign equals models foreign key 2 equals campaign. And if the parent campaign is deleted, we also want to delete out the subscribers for that campaign. So if for some reason this is something we may not want, so if we wanted it to work in a way that whenever a campaign got deleted, we should keep the subscribers maybe for the related events, then you can run models.do nothing. So do nothing. There's also set null that just nullifies all the records for the corresponding one that was deleted, but usually that's not what you want to do. You maybe want to keep them or remove them. Let's also take the user's email. So email equals models.email field. Then we can also have created that, updated that. So let's get this. I'm actually going to take the class method too. Let's have the created that, updated that. If we ever need those, usually we will. Let's have the ordering. Let's also have this. Let's also have the toString. Just label the user's email. So if you don't customize how the Django admin looks, so the value in the toString of this model is the one that is used as like the identifier, the human readable identifier in the Django admin. But we'll get there, so we'll see how that works. So now that we have our model set up, now we can create our migrations and run them. So down here, and basically what that means is we want to prepare our DB to now start to accept connections and work. So what we have here is an SQLite that Django ships with, that Python ships with, and Django uses that at the start. So that's what we want to work with. Now, whenever we are deploying this, of course, we will have to change it to Postgres. So sure, this is just going to be useful in development. So here, let's run our migrations. So Python manage.py make migrations. So if we run that, you can see, oh, so one thing you'll notice is nothing green. That's because whenever we create an app, we need to add it in our installed apps in the settings.py section. So what we want is we want to go to apps.py, and then we have the name. So this is what we want to copy, and then in the main project folder settings, we want to go to installed apps and also add all our installed apps there. So that allows Django to know where to collect things like migrations from. So let's rerun again. So when we run again, you can see we have an error. Somehow I thought there was something wrong here. I couldn't really tell, but the thing is args is a star, is just one star. So let's correct that. So now models.py save. Okay, looks good. So let's run again. Then we don't have models from django.db.models. How are we importing this? This should be models.slug field. Okay. You guys already noticed this stuff, I believe. So when we run, you can see that our models get created. So now if we migrate this, and now that we have all our database tables created, we can go ahead and start to make our API endpoints. So we don't need many. We only need one that's going to be retrieving all our campaign list. And that one is going to be, of course, used by the front end, the Next.js front end, because the Next.js front end would need to display a list in HTML. And also we're going to have an endpoint that retrieves one, just so when they go to the detail page, they make a request to get more details about that specific campaign that the user will be viewing. And also we are going to have an endpoint that can allow the front end to subscribe a user to a campaign. So we're going to go to our views.py. So views.py in our models app. I always prefer to use the Django generic views. They give us a very cleaner API, and we just need to, in our code, implement specific things. Let's say if we wanted to implement pagination, we only need to add like a pagination class property to our class. If we wanted to like handle permissions, authentication for that very view, it's just a matter of adding one line of code and things work. And that's why I always prefer them. Makes you write less code and keeps your code elegant. And something maybe I can say is whenever you add code to the code base, usually what happens for us as developers is whenever we add code to a code base, we don't think about the cost of maintaining that code. So whenever you have code, just remember you have to maintain it. So the less code you have, the less bugs you have, the better your life will be. Anyway, so here, let's go ahead and import generics. So from REST framework. So let's first work on the endpoint that's going to be retrieving all our campaigns. So class campaign list API view. This one is going to be, since we want to show a list, then we're going to be inheriting from list view. So we're going to inherit from generics.list API view. And here we want to specify the serializer class and also the get query set. So let's first implement the get query set. So def. So this is a function that is used to query for the records that are going to be returned in this list and passed to the serializer. So you need to implement this, and here for the return, what you want is you want to return a query set. So a query set is a set of records. It's not a query, but it's a result of a query. So you want to make sure you make a query here and you return the results back to the class. So we need to import our model. So from .models, I'm just going to use relative imports here. Let's import, we need to import campaign. So here we want to query all of them. So campaign objects all, and that's it. So the next thing we're going to need to do is set the serializer. Whenever you're working with JS framework, the serializers are everything. What do I mean by everything? So serializers are used to validate incoming input from the user, and to also to specify outputs for the different responses for the user. So it's very important you really understand what serializer fields are available, just so you can create clean serializers. So if I can show you here, if I go to API guide, serializers, specifically serializer fields, you're gonna see all these fields. So these fields have built-in validations, they like built-in transformations on how responses should be. So you wanna take time to, whenever you're working on a project, come here and see, okay, what could I use for this specific field? So something I felt I would mention, I was thinking about this, and I think when I get time, I might make specific videos just to illustrate how this can be used, like shorts or something like that. But it's a very important concept. Serializers are very important concepts. So you want to make sure you invest time to learn about them. So going back to here, let's create our serializer for the campaign. So class campaign serializer. We're going to inherit from serializers. Let's import serializers from Django REST framework. So then we want to inherit from serializers model serializer. And you might be asking, why am I inheriting from model serializer? Why not just import from serializers.serializer? So that's because when you look at our model, the model specifies criteria on what we need. So we need maybe this to not exceed this. So the model already enforces specific validations. So right now, if we wanted to only rely on the validations from the model, then what we can do is, instead of us specifying the serializer fields, we can just rely on the model one. So whenever you specify that you want to use a model serializer, you want to provide a class meta to specify which fields you want included in your responses and checked on requests. So we want to specify a model. So the model is going to be the campaign and also the fields. So the fields, if you want to only expose title, description, and maybe the slug, and not send this, we would only create a list and we specify this. But at this point, we don't really have anything we don't want to send back. So we can specify that, be sure to send us everything. Okay, so under all, we'll make sure all the fields are included, so we don't have to type them one by one. So let's import the model. So from .models, import the campaign. And once we have that, we have the class meta. Let's also have the serializer for the subscriptions, because for that, we need to make sure the emails are validated and all that stuff. So it's going to be a model serializer. Now, this is going to be a subscriber model. So subscriber, then we can base on that right here. And if we take a look at our models, then you will notice that for the subscriber, we only have the campaign and then the email, and these ones are auto-created, so they have default values. So we also don't have to worry about specifying different fields. So now that we have our serializers set up, then we can import our serializer in our views. So from .serializers, import subscriber and also the campaign subscriber serializer. We need to rename this, I believe. Oh, it should be subscriber serializer. So this should be subscriber serializer, and this is what we want to import in the views. So import subscriber serializer, and also we want to import the campaign serializer. So once we import those, we want to specify serializer class as a class property. So serializer underscore class. So we set that one to our serializer that's going to handle serializations for this view. So this is going to be serializer. So I'm going to save this. And that's pretty much it. We don't have to handle any authentication. We don't have to handle pagination. What we can do now is we need to set up our URLs, URL patterns, and then hook up the routing for our app with our routing for the main application. So let's go ahead and set up our urls.py, and we want to import path. So from Django URLs, then what we want to do is we want to set URL patterns, and then we specify path. We want to say that every time the user goes to /campaigns on our API, then we can instruct Django to handle that using our campaign list API view. So in the urls.py, we specify the path. So path, we want to say if someone goes to campaigns, then we want to handle that using the view. So let's import views. So from .views, import, we need campaign list API view. So since it's a class-based view, we want to do as view. So as view, then we can set a name. This name can give us an easy way to get the details of the URL without having to know the URL. So you will see what I'm talking about, but I'm going to give it the name of campaigns. So whenever we are testing, we are going to be using the reverse utility to know more about the URL without having to go to /campaigns /anything. So now that we have our URL patterns, for now we have one, we're going to be adding more here. We need to hook this one up with our main application routing. So we can go to our main urls.py here. And right now we only have the admin. We also want to have another path. So for this one, we're going to say every time you go to /API, we are going to be sending you to other apps. So for now, let's import include. So include allows us to combine URL patterns. So what we can do is here we can have include, and inside there, then we can specify the path to the URLs. So just the way we specified the app name in settings.py, you can start we set it up as campaigns. So whatever you have here, sometimes you might have a path or an import like backend.campaigns. So to include the URLs in that app, we put the name which should match in the settings, then .urls. And we have an issue importing subscriber serializer in the views, I believe. So we need to save this. And now, once we run back the application, you can see that it's running. So I'm going to click there. The page has changed, and now we can see some other URLs added here. So I'm going to go to /API /campaigns, since that's the path we specified in our app. Now when we come here, you can see that we have no campaigns now. And so I'm going to create a super user since we have already set up our models. So I'm going to stop our server real quick and run manage.py create super user. So Python manage.py create super user. So we can specify the username and the email, then the password can be anything. So let's run back our server. And now if we went back to our application, so if we want to localhost port 8000, so when I go to /admin, we can go to the Django admin, and then I'm going to log in as the user I just created in the terminal. So that user was Chris, I believe. Hopefully I remember the password. You can see that we don't have our model added here. So what we want to do is we want to go to our app. So whenever we have an app, we have the admin.py file, and we need to register the model here. So we want to do from models import. So we want to import the campaign. Let's also import the subscriber, because we also are going to need to register them. So here what you can do is we can use admin.site.register. Then we want to register them one by one. Let's start with the campaign one. Then let's also register the subscribers. So subscriber. Alright, so once we have that and save and come back to the site, I'm going to refresh. Okay, so here if I click on campaigns, you can see that there's nothing. So we're going to try to add a campaign. So when I click add, you can see that we need to add a title. So for the title, the mega, let's say the mega market conf. Okay, so for the description, this can be anything. I'm just going to pick a random picture. So notice how the Slack required us to enter it, and it didn't allow us to save, so the save method gets caught. So what you can do is we can tell Django to not accept this at request time. So what you can do here on the slug field, we can say, okay, that's the max length, but it can be blank, but it can be null. So null equals true and blank equals true. So if you're confused about these properties, so for null means that we can pretty much not set a value at all, and blank means that we can set the value that is empty, like an empty value, something like an empty string. So that's the blank one. The null is just you don't set it at all. So that's how it works. Now whenever we change the models, we need to update our migrations. So let's do that. So make migrations, migrate, then migrate. So let's run back the server. So I'm gonna try again. So I'm gonna click and then click save. So here we did cloudinary.config and then we passed the cloud name. So notice how we said cloud name. So it should be cloud name. Okay, so let's save that and try again. So we're gonna need to retry this. So let's say the mega conf. Then description can be anything. So I'm gonna save now. When we save, you can see that this was now created and we have our event here. And right here, you can see we also have the file that was set. Notice how it has this name here. So if I open this in a new tab, you can see that it points to Cloudinary. So all Cloudinary resources are prefixed with this. And then down here, we have like other things and the name at the end. And you can see that it was transformed to a JPEG because we set the transformations on our model. So that's how that works. And now if we go to our API endpoint, so if we go to /API/campaigns, we go to the list, you should be able to see that we have one item and the slug was automatically generated. So let's go ahead and now add an endpoint that can retrieve one of these that the details will use. It's pretty much going to look like, the object's going to look like this because there's not really much. But oftentimes you want to send the little amount of information, especially on the list endpoints. So the detail endpoint is always going to be needed. But for now, this is okay. We don't really have a lot of properties. But let's also have the details endpoint. So we're gonna go to the views and also we need to have the details. So to create the details endpoint, we're gonna have a class-based view also. So we can call this campaign detail. So campaign detail inherits from generics. So there is one called a retrieve API view and that can be used for the details. But also I want to talk about the generic API view. So let's just get generic. So guys, whenever you find that what you wanna do does not easily fit the case, like you're not really, maybe you may not be sure about which one to use, and you want to implement the HTTP method yourself. So let's say you want to implement the put, the patch, or the put, the patch, the get, the post, and you don't want to use this. So like that would be like re-implementing them. But if you want to take that route, then you want to inherit from generic API views, and then you can handle any kind of method here. So since it's generic, then it can handle anything. So you can handle put, patch, you can handle, I guess it's called post and get. So all those. So in our case, let's use this to handle the get. So when we're trying to get one, so get will be taking in self request and then the slug. So we're gonna be, since our slugs are gonna be unique and the front end is gonna be sending the slug, since that will be what the front end will be using. So in here, what we want to do is we want to query for the item with this slug. We can say query set. Let's set that one to campaign objects filter. Then we want to filter by the one with this slug. So what you can do here is you can do campaign objects filter. So we want to filter by the slug. So this, where the slug equals to this slug. So the reason why I'm using the filter is because it doesn't throw an error. So we can do fast on it. So it's always going to return one. And we can handle the case where this didn't match, like the front end didn't send something that matched in our DB. So we can say if we have the query set, then we want to return that data to the user. So we can say return. So now we're going to be handling responses ourselves, and that's the drawback why you don't want to use generic API views, but use like retrieve API view in this case. So you guys can try retrieve API view to implement the same thing. So let's import responses. So whenever we want to send a response to the front end, we have a response class that you can call on this response. So if we have that query set, so if we matched, then we can return response dot response. Then we can send back JSON. Now we are going to have to serialize the query set because this is a model, a Python object. This is a model object, so we want to serialize it to JSON and send it back. So we can pass it to our serializer. So I'm going to set the serializer class even on the detail view. Allow me to change this to API view. So what we can do is, so to use this serializer to serialize this object, you can just pass it by calling the serializer class. So by the way, serif.serializer class is equivalent to you just calling this. Okay, so we're just referring to it just to keep things a bit more organized. So serializer class then takes in the instance it's gonna serialize. So by default, whenever you pass something there, it's expected to be one instance, which in our case should be one instance. So query set. So if you want to serialize more than this, in any case, you want to pass another option for many equals true. So if you're serializing more than one instance, you want to pass many equals true, but in our case it's one. And then we want to call .data in it. So the serializer of course has different fields, but the .data is the one that gives you the serialized version of what you passed in here. Okay. So now that we have that response, we can handle a case where we didn't find it. So if we don't have it, we can just return a 404. So we can just response. We have statuses from REST framework. So let's go ahead and import them. Okay, so down here we can just return HTTP 404 not found. And we need to add this in our URLs. So I'm gonna copy, duplicate this. Let's also import the detail. So that's what we want to use for the second one. Let's keep a comma, and this one is going to be handling the campaign, not campaigns. So here we are going to be handling when a user goes to the campaign / the Slack. So we can specify it here. So we need to have a slash here, and now if we come back and refresh, you can see that it gets the one, and now we have only the object and not the array, we only have one object and not the array. So that's it. If we put something that doesn't exist, we should get the 404. Let's see. You can see we get the not found, meaning that those two are working. So the last endpoint you're going to need to work on now is going to be the endpoint to allow a user to subscribe to a campaign. Okay, so let's go to our views, and in our views, we need to set up another class-based view that will handle the creation of a new subscriber to come to a campaign. So what we want is to set up a class. So I'm going to call it subscribe API view, subscribe to campaign. Hey, what's a long name? API view, and then we want to inherit from. So this one we're going to use the generics create API view, and yeah, just easier to work with. So generics dot create API view. So that one is used to handle. It knows that you're gonna need to create, so it goes ahead to handle the post for us. So the things we did here handling the get, for it's gonna do whatever needs to be done to handle the post. So it's gonna be create API view. What we need to do is handle the get query set. So whenever we create, it needs to use the get query set to know which one to send back. So here we can actually say like subscriber objects with latest. That's gonna send the last one we added. But using latest actually needs us to update our model. So right now I'm just gonna get all of them because, like I said, it doesn't really matter so much. So let's import subscriber from the model. So also we need to specify the serializer class. So that's used to serialize the incoming request to make sure the email and the campaign exist in the request. Let's have serializer underscore class, and we can set that one to our subscriber serializer class. So that's gonna be this. So Control A, then let's have it here. Okay, so now that we are done setting up our API view, Then we can also add it to our URLs. So here we can have campaigns subscribe. So let's have subscribe. Let's also import our view. So subscribe API view. That's the one we want to use here. Let's say subscribe here. So for us to test out our subscribe, I'm going to copy our URL. So, and then I'm going to open up Postman. So Postman is a tool that allows us to test API endpoints. So since we're going to be making a post request, we're going to come here and we say we want to go to, let's see, localhost port 8000/API. So I'm going to copy that, bring it here. Alright, slash. We want to make a post request. So we want to go to the body and we want to specify the data we want to send. So we need the email and also the campaign. So those are the required fields from the model. So let's set an email, and now let's say email at app.com. So let's also set the campaign. So the campaign, since it's a foreign key, then we need to use its ID. So at this point in time, we already have created one. So that means that the ID that was assigned is one. That's what we want to use. So let's send here. You can see post not allowed. So let's take a look at what's going on. So what's happening is the subscribe is being passed as this flag. So what's happening, our request is being handled on this point. So when we send the request, it is only handled up to here, because now the flag here is looked at as the subscribe one. So what you can do in this case is move this one down, or we could use a completely different one here. We could use a completely different URL here. So I'm going to do subscribers, and I'm just going to remove campaigns from the start. So that means that now the request we are going to make is going to go to /subscribers, and it's going to be a post request, and we are sending the campaign and the email. So I'm going to send this, and notice that we get one created here. And now if you go to our Django admin, so I'm going to go to the Django admin. So that's found at /admin. So once we get in and go to the subscribers list, you can see that we have one subscriber, and when we click on them, you can see which campaign they subscribe to. So that's it. In the next one, I'm going to be showing you other things we can do in the backend. Hopefully we'll finish the backend in the next one. So thanks guys for watching, and I'll talk to you in the next video. Hey guys, welcome back. So in this one, we're going to go ahead and customize a few things in our admin, and also set up documentation for our API, just so it can be easy to use for both the front-end developers, of which it's still going to be us today, and also for the admin users. So to get started, we want to be able to add other fields here, like when this was created on the list. We want to enable a way to search for these if there are many, and also I'm going to show you how you can add pagination if there are like many records in the admin. So let's start with the campaign. So let me bring up the code. So if we go to our app, our campaigns app, we have the admin.py file. What we did was simply register our models to be able to show in the admin. We can be able to customize this one better using the model admin. So the way that works is we create a class. So I'm going to go ahead and create a class, or it's going to be a model admin class. So let's do class. Let's start with the campaign. So it's going to be campaign model admin, and we have to inherit from model admin, and we get that from admin.model admin. So what we want is to be able to set up fields that should show here, and we do that by specifying a list display property, and we set that to an iterable. So we're going to want to see the title. Let's also make it able that we can see the created art, so we can see the time that it was created. Also, I'm going to add updated art. So once you create a custom model admin for the model, what you always want to do is still register it on the admin with the model itself. So the way we do that is first we pass the model itself, and then we pass the admin class as the second one. And you can see from this signature here that the second has to be an admin class, and it should be of title model admin. So let me save this, and now if we go to the to our server and refresh, you can be able to see that now we have created that and updated that. So I'm also going to show you how to add a search field just so a user can be able to search. So still on the properties, you have to specify search underscore fields. So that also is going to be an iterable. So let's enable the search by the title. Also, let's enable the search by the description. Okay, so let's check that. So I'm going to come and refresh. I notice that now we have a field that can enable us to search, and I can pretty much search by anything. So I can pretty much enter anything and it's gonna try to match titles and the descriptions. So here you can see that in the description we have test. So if you came back to our list and put in test, let's put in TES and do a search, you can see that we still match this very campaign. So let me change this to something that wouldn't exist, like YOLO. Hopefully this doesn't, and search. You can see that this doesn't exist and the search is working. So another thing I want to show you is how to add pagination. So let's remove the search because it's kind of limiting. So let's say we had two campaigns. So I'm going to click add and let's add another one. So let's save this. So let's say we had very many of these, let's say like 100 or more, and we wanted to enable pagination on them. What you can do is on the model admin, so right here, you can specify a property called list per page. So list per page, and you can see all the properties that are available here through the editor autocomplete. So what we want is list per page, and we can set that to a number. So if we set it to 1 in our case, since we don't have many, and come back to our admin, I'm going to refresh here. And you can see that we have the pagination added. So that's how you add it. So if we click on page 2, you should be able to see that we see page 2. If we go on page 1, you can see page 1, and you can enable all of them. So that's how you add pagination. If you had very many records here, that's when it would be useful, but that's how you go about it. So moving on, we are going to go to our subscribers, and on the subscribers, we want to do the same thing, but we also want to be able to search subscribers by the campaign they subscribe to. So that kind of raises a situation where we need to work with the foreign keys. So let's go ahead and see how that one works. So I'm going to go here and create another mode admin for the subscriber model. So I'm just going to copy and replace this since we pretty much know what this is about. And just copy this. Then let's rename campaign to model. So we want to be able to show the email and when someone subscribed. Okay, so we can say we want to show the email and then the campaign that someone subscribed to. So let me just change this one to campaign, and also maybe when they signed up or they subscribed. So let's change this one to created at. Okay, and we're going to keep these as the same fields in the search, just so I can illustrate the problem better. So I'm going to do this. So after we specify the model admin, we also want to send it to the register through the register function. So let's bring it here and save. And now if we go back here and refresh, we have the created at, we have the search fields. But one thing I want to show you here is, let's say we try to search for something like conf. So I'm going to put conf here and click enter. Notice that we get an error that says that related field got an invalid lookup, and that's typically because by default whenever we use a foreign key, if we don't specify a related field, it goes ahead to use the ID. And here basically what we need to do is specify the field it should search by in the related model. So in the campaign, we need to specify a field it should search by when we are defining the search fields. So here where we have search fields and we have campaigns, we want to be able to search by the campaign's title, but the campaigns is a model and the title is an attribute on that. So what we need to do is we can use this syntax here, and at the end we put the field we want to search by in the related model. So if we save this and come back around, I'm gonna search again, you should be able to see that now we match and we don't really get an error. So let's search, and the search is working. Okay, so that's okay, that's good. So the next thing you're going to need to do now is to set up documentation for our API. And since we are using Django REST framework, the easiest way to get documentation up and running is to use DRF YASIG. Now I've used this in several of my videos. It's really a good one, and we are just going to stick with that and add our documentation. So to use drf yasig to document our API, we're going to go to drf yasig. Let's go to its documentation and take a look at what we need to do. So I'm going to open it up. So we need to install drf yasig. So I'm going to copy this and go to the terminal. I'll stop the server and run pip install drf yasig. And as it installs, I'm going to come back around here. So what we need to do is add it to our installed apps, so just Django knows about it. So I'm going to go to our settings py and scroll to where we have installed apps. So right here, I'm actually going to put it on top of our custom app. So if you go to the documentation, basically what we need to do is to specify a schema view, and then we can hook in the URLs where we want our documentation to be. So it's going to be, we're just going to use the boilerplate that they give in the documentation. So I'm going to copy this and go to urls.py. So here we can define the URL patterns. We are just going to keep only one path, the one that serves the Swagger documentation. We want to listen for when a user goes to the home page, and then we want to serve the documentation to them. So let me remove this. So right now, what we have is we have a URL patterns with the path. So we're going to copy this path here and take it to our main URL patterns. So over here, we can paste there the path for the documentation and save that. So let's look at the schema view. So basically the schema view, it enables us to specify some meta information for our API. So we're just going to change this to be not snippets, but campaign manager. Yeah, so now if you go back to our application, I'm going to go to here and go to the home route. Oh, our server is actually off, so let me bring it back up. So the server is now on. So if you go back to here and refresh, you can see that we have the documentation being served and everything is good. Yeah, so we now have the documentation that our front end will use. So we'll be using this endpoint here to get a list of campaigns that will show on our Next.js front end. Then the detail endpoint that we will make a call to, that will give us the details of the campaign, and the subscribe. So we're going to be making a post request from our form from the front end. So now our API is done. We have everything on our Django setup. So what's left here is to maybe set up some CORS to enable access from different domains. So hopefully later I can show how to deploy this to app platform, so you guys can put it on a live environment. So in the next one, we're going to start working on our Next.js front end. So if it helped you, give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to sub, and I'll talk to you in the next video. Hey guys, welcome back. So in this one, we're going to go ahead and set up our Next.js project and explore the basics of how routing works in Next.js, and also customize the way our folders are going to be. So to get started, right here you can see that we have the front-end folder, and that's where we want to work from now, since we want to separate the backend and the front end. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new terminal window, and I'm sticking to command prompt. I want to make sure we are on the same page, so I don't want to be using git bash when someone doesn't have git bash installed. So if you're on Mac, you just want to have a new window, and the commands are just going to be the same. So to create a Next.js project, we use a tool called Create Next App. So I'm going to cd into the front end. So here we want to run Create Next App. So we could go ahead and install Create Next App as a global package on our computer, but we don't want to do that because we have npx. So npx allows us to use a module without actually installing it. Create Next App included. So we want to do npx create -next -app, and then we want to give it a name. So let's say our project is going to be called maybe Campaign Manager. We'll put the name here, but for now we are going to keep it as front end. So we could go ahead and add front end here, and what that would do is it would go ahead and create a folder inside our front end called front end and add there all the boilerplate for Next.js inside. But that's not what we want. We don't want to nest a front end folder inside front end. In fact, but what we want is want to create all the Next.js files inside our front end. So if we want to create the app directly where we are, you can go ahead and add a dot at the end and click enter. And you can see that now it's putting in Node here. So we have Node and Python. So it's going to go ahead and create a Node project. So you can see we have the package JSON. So we have basically the simple starter. Let's wait for it to go ahead and scaffold the whole project, and then we pick up from there. Okay, so now the command is done. So what it wanted to do, it created us the Next.js boilerplate inside front end. So we have the pages folder. So inside the pages folder, this is where our pages would go. You can think of a page in Next.js as a representation of each web page. So by default, we have the index.js, and this is the home page. So if we had like the about page, we would add about.js here. If we add like the contact us page, we would have contact us.js here, and the styles here, we can write our styles for the components we'll write, and also the pages we would write. So if we wanted to style those, we would put them here. So by default, Next.js supports CSS modules, and CSS modules is just a way that you can write CSS that gets assigned random classes at compile time, and that helps us to scope our styles to specific components and not having different styles override the other ones in other components. So we have the ES.json, this is for linting, and we have the config. So in the config, this is where we would put different settings regarding how we want Next.js to handle different things. So in the package.json here, usually we have 3 scripts set up for us. So we have the dev script, this we use in development. We have the build. If we wanted to deploy this to a server, we would run build. So we have the start. So the start is used on the server. So if we build the project, this start is the one that basically runs the app in production. So we also have the lint. This is for linting. And yeah, so for the dependencies, we have Next.js, we have Next, we have React and React DOM. So these use Webpack and Babel under the hood, just so we can get a good experience developing. So down here, we have the dev dependencies. We just have ESLint stuff. So to run the project, to take a look at what we have, we run the dev script because that is the one we use in development. So what we want to do is we want to put yarn dev, and that's going to go ahead and open up on port 3000. So I'm going to go to the browser. So it's compiling here. So it's done compiling. So if you go back here, you can see that we have the Next.js welcome page, and our Next.js project is up and running. So Next.js uses file-based routing. So the routes we put here in the browser are immediately mapped to the files in our project. So in the pages folder, this is where you put your routes. For example, let's say we wanted to have like the about route. So if we would have to write about.js like this. And here, what we can have is just a React component. So let's just have a React component there. So we have function about. The convention for the file is use a small letter for everything. And then of course we can still use our regular components, but we're going to see how to set up like a components folder. So here, this can be named anything, and since it's a React component, this one we can now name it using a capital letter. So I'm just gonna change this one from about to about. So even this, I'm gonna change it to about. And now when I save and go back to the browser and go to /about, notice that we get a page rendered. Now our page doesn't contain anything for now, but let's say we returned an h1 that said about us like this. So if we save this, you can see that the compiling happens. So we still have hot reload enabled, and if we come back here, everything updates and we have the about us. So let's say we wanted to have another page that maybe had our contact information. So do that by creating a page. We'd call it something like contact.js like this. And in here, we can just have a React component. The common convention is React components are named using capital letters. And that's what you want to make sure you are using. So let's return contact us. So now if you go back here, we should be able to go to /contact, and we should have the contact page being rendered. So those are the basics of just routing using this. Now we also have dynamic routing. So let's say we wanted to go to a dynamic item we pick from the server. So we're going to be looking at that in the later videos when we are fetching from our server. But this is how we basically route. Now what I want to do now is to show you how else we could organize this. So of course, with the React kind of project, we want to have a way to have our components in one place. So you could go ahead and you create components here, a components folder here. So let's create it, and this is where we would put all our reusable pieces of the UI. So also to keep organizing our project, we also want to have a constants folder where we can keep all our constants, and you'll be seeing how we'll use these in our simple project you're going to create. So let's have constants here. So we might have cases where we need to maybe isolate some specific functions that we reuse in different places. So we can also have a folder for that. So I'm going to create a folder called utils. So also when we are doing like data fetching, we want to have like the data fetching setup logic in one place. And usually this is done in a folder called services, but sometimes you would see one called lib, especially with Next.js projects. So we'll have lib here, and this is where we'll put like all our setup for like our fetcher function that would set up the like Axios or something like that. So now one thing you will notice here is when we keep adding folders here, this keeps getting a lot. Like we get more files added here, and it's usually hard to look at. So Next.js supports us creating an SRC folder, and then we can have all our major project source code in the SRC folder. So what we're going to do here is we're going to create an SRC folder, and then we're going to move everything here. So I'm going to move pages inside SRC. I'm also going to move components inside SRC. I'm going to move constants inside SRC. And also I'm going to take the styles. So let's bring them there. And also the utils in there. Okay, so let's see what's up with the folder, the pages, because we need them to come down here. Okay, so after we move everything inside SRC, you can see that now our folders are still minimal, and we can add all our like main source code inside SRC. So in the root we have like config files, and then all our major project code can go in SRC. So if we go back to our application, so I'm going to go back to Chrome and refresh this. I'm actually going to go to the home page. You can see that everything is still working out of the box, and we didn't have to reconfigure anything. So something to take away here is Next.js supports putting everything inside the SRC folder by default. And yeah, so that's going to do it for this introduction video. So in the next one, we're going to be looking at how to add like custom font, how to use CSS modules, how to route to a dynamic page. So it's going to be interesting. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe. I'll talk to you in the next one. Hey guys, welcome back. Last time we were able to set up our Next.js project. So in this one, we're going to go ahead and fetch a list of campaigns from our server and display them using Next.js on the front end. So I'm here on the Next.js website. So they have 3 unique ways to fetch data from the server. We can implement get static props. Basically, we use this when we want to fetch data at build time, and we have get static paths. So this works hand in hand with get static props to be able to generate routes based on the data. So we're going to be working with these two. Get server-side props is specific for server-side rendering. So if you wanted to be fetching data on every request, we'd be using this. In our case, we're going to be using the static generation approach such that the data is prefetched at build time and the pages are pre-rendered. Aside from that, we're also going to be able to set up custom fonts with our Next.js projects and also write some styles to make it look like this. So we'll also look at how to use environment variables and use them in the browser, and we'll talk a little bit about what the difference is and how Next.js works with them. Okay, so this is where we stopped up from. Now I'm going to go back to our VS Code project. So in the source folder, we have the pages folder, and this is where our index.js is, and this is where we want to work. So I'm going to go ahead and remove everything. So for now, I'm just going to create an H1. All right, so if we check here again, we should have available campaigns, and you can see we have just a typical H1. So right now let's work on configuring our application to use a custom font. So we'll be using a font called Meriwether Sans. So let me go ahead and bring it up, and we can get it on Google Fonts. So what we want to do is we want to come to fonts.google.com. We're also going to use another font called Nonito. So over here, let's say we want to get the regular 400 and maybe a 700 one. We're just going to get the bold. So we have these two here, and if we wanted to use them, if we wanted to link to them, we would go ahead and copy this link here. So I'm going to copy this, and now that we have our font, the question is, where do we put them? So we would want all our websites to use these fonts. So it would not be ideal to add these fonts on every page, like in the pages folder. But what we can do is, if we come over here in the docs, if we come here on the Next.js docs, we have something called a document. We have some information that tells us about what it's about and how we can use that. So you can see that we could create a document, that augments our application's HTML and body tags. And the way it works is it uses all this Next.js stuff. What you have to know about this is we can use this to set up things like fonts, to load any other extra JavaScript we would want to load. So what you can do is we're going to need to create something similar. So I'm going to copy this whole document here. And in our application, in the pages folder, we want to create an underscore document.js file. So over here, then we can go ahead and paste in what we got from what we got from the documentation, and we can go ahead and export it. So export default, it's called my document. So we are not going to be working with get initial props. So we are only going to be worrying about how our HTML is rendered, and we are going to need to work inside the head. If you think about our regular HTML page or structure, we usually have the HTML and then the head and then the body. Now here in the head is where we would add things like links to external CSS, links to fonts. So over here, I'm going to open this one up and we're going to add our links to the fonts. Okay, so now let's go ahead and get our font. So we're going to go back to the browser. So on the Meriwether Sans, you're going to go ahead and select the 400. So 400 is the font weight. So let's select this. Let's also grab the 700. All right. Let's also go and grab the Nonito font. So what you can do is here, we can go ahead and refresh this. So let's refresh here. So that's going to go ahead and see that we've selected some other fonts before. So what you can do is also select the Nonito font. So I'm going to select the regular 400 and yeah, so that's going to do it. Now what we need to do is go ahead and copy these links here. So I'm going to copy this, go back to our VS Code. So in our document in our underscore document.js, since we are not using it in a regular JS project but a JSX project here, we can go ahead and fix these errors by closing these tags. So let's also close this and save. And that's going to go ahead and include our fonts. Now since we want our fonts to be used on every web page, we have a file where we can put our global styles, and in styles, that file is called global.css. So what you can do here is we can change which font we use in the body to use our own, and also we're going to change the fonts that our paragraphs are going to use. So to use the Nonito one. So I'm going to come here, and down here we have a way we can specify them. So I'm just going to copy the first one, and where we have, and here on the font family, just going to replace the default ones to use our Meriwether. So once we save that, we also want to change paragraphs to use our Nonito font. So here you can say all paragraphs should use a Nonito font. Now let's go ahead and copy the style for that. Should be chap. So here we can include our font and save. So if I go back to index.js, I'm going to create a paragraph. So P. Let's make sure these are in one parent element. And this is just the same way React works. Like this is just React. There's nothing new here. So we always want to make sure that all our elements have one parent element. So now if you go back to the site, we should be able to see that this changes. So to verify, I'm going to go ahead and remove the styles and we see if this changes at all. I'm going to go ahead and comment this. So I'm going to comment this and this. Now I've not really saved, so things are still good, but notice when I save, so I'm going to come and save that, come back over here, you can see that we lost the font. So that means that our font is integrated and things should be okay. So we can move on to now creating our page. So now let's go ahead and do our data fetching and display campaigns in our UI, and then we can go ahead and style them after. So back here, so whenever you're fetching data for the page, you want to fetch that data in the page. That helps out making sure that data is only fetched in the pages that it's needed from. I'm going to come over here, and whenever we want to fetch data and we want to make sure that Next.js fetches it at build time, we want to export an async function called getStaticProps. So what you can do here is we want to say export async. It has to be async because inside there we need to do an asynchronous operations. So let's call it getStaticProps, and this is how you have to call this. Anything else will not work really, and this is how Next.js understands that this should be fetching data at build time. So you want to make sure you call it this. So inside here, we can go ahead and fetch our data. So what we can do here is we can use fetch to get this data. So I'm going to go ahead and say const response equals await. So since we are in an async function, and we can use await. So let's await fetch. Inside here, we need to put the URL that we're going to fetch data from. So if you go back to our documentation, we need to call this endpoint for get campaigns. And by the way, let's first try it here in the docs, and it's going to send us this. So this is what we want to call, just like we called it here, but now we want to call it using fetch. So I'm going to copy this and bring it in the code. So that's what we want to put here. And later I'm going to be showing you how to put this in an environment variable. So that's going to give us a response. But then with fetch, the actual data is in another promise. So here we can do const data equals await. So we want to await response. Then we want to transform that into JSON. And that's going to be our data. So from here, we need to return props. So we need to return an object that has props. All right. And this is how it should be. This is the way it should be. You want to make sure you return something called props here. And then down here, you can return any props. So since we want to return the data, we can say data. We can say data will be data. And also we can return anything else here. And that should be available as props to our page. So to test it out, let's return something called done. We're going to send that as true. So now once we create our async function and return props here, these props are going to be available in the page itself. So here we can destructure them. We can say data and also done. All right. So let's go ahead and console log this. So we're going to console log data. So I'm also going to console log done. The way I'm getting this console log, you can see I'm able to type CLO and click enter and things work. And that's because I have an extension called ES7 React Redux GraphQL React Native snippets. This is the one that gives us this functionality, and it's the one that we can use to generate the React components. So now if you go back to our application, so I'm going to open up the Chrome JavaScript console, and we come here. So you can see down here that we got data, and the data is an array with the items from our server. So that means we are able to fetch the data from the server. So let's go ahead and just do something simple to display it on the page. So what you can do here, since data is going to be an array, we can go ahead and map over it and display it in a list. So here, let's use a div. So in here, I'm going to create a main. So now here, that's where we can put our available campaigns. And for now, I'm just going to map over them. So we're going to do data.map. So map takes in a callback function, and that callback function can access each element in that array. So let's have element, and we want to return a div. So let's return a div. It's going to represent a list item on our UI. And since this is React, remember, we need to pass keys. So React knows how to handle rendering of our list. So let's pass element. We need to use a unique property here, and we know that our slugs are always unique, so that's what we want to use here. So inside here, we need to show an image and to also show the title and then the description. So I'm going to have a div that's going to contain both of those, and I'm going to have a first div that's going to contain the image. So we want to display them as flex, like left to right. So here I'm going to use the regular image, and then we're going to talk about the Next.js image component and how that's different from this. So for the source, so the source of this is going to be element dot. So let's take a look at our response from the API. So if we take a look, our image is dot logo. So that's what we want to use. So let's go here. I'm going to do dot logo. So let's close it. Let's apply some height and width. So height, let's send like 120. Let's apply some width. So we can specify an alt. So if it doesn't load, the user should know what's going on. So we can say campaign, maybe banner or something like that. So on the right, we want to have another div that's going to have a title, and then the description. And also we're going to show some, and we're also going to show this date here when it was created. So let's have an h1 there, and here we can show the title. So let's just put element dot title. So let's also have the description. So we're just going to have a p, and for the p we show the the description, so element.description, and we can use TypeScript to get autocomplete for these things, but that we are not going to cover. We probably are going to cover that in the future. So down here, let's also show the date when it was posted. So let's have element created at like this and save. And now if you go back to our UI, so we're going to go here and come back here, you can see that we are able to display this on a page. One thing that's not working really well is the images, they're not being loaded, and the reason for that is because on the server we are getting a relative path and not the absolute path. So every time we upload to Cloudinary, we only get the relative path, and to get the absolute path, we're going to go to our admin. So I'm just going to /admin here. Then I'm going to click on the image from here. So if I click on this, you can see that it renders the image, but notice that it prefixes everything with up to here. So we're going to copy this. We're going to copy the prefix. So our relative URL starts at image/upload. So now what we can do is in our project, so here we can do what we got as the prefix, and we want to stop before /image because /image is provided from the API. So if we come back here and check, you can see we have image. So we want to add a slash, make sure it's matching. So this is now going to be the prefix / our relative URL. So now if you go back to our application and go to the home page, you can see that now we are able to render the images. So let's talk a little bit about the image component that we get in Next.js. So I'm gonna come here and search for image. So this is a component that's built into Next.js, and it's built to enable optimizations. So the things that it gives us out of the box are loading the images only when we need to see them. So let's say a page had like very many images, it would go ahead and load only the images that the user is seeing. So whenever we scroll like down, then it can load those images dynamically. Also, if we went ahead and put this in a mobile view, you can see that we are still seeing the same image with the image size as we would see on the web. But when we're using the Next.js image component, it goes ahead and does the resizing for us depending on the device viewport. For looking at the examples, you guys can come over here and see what else you could do. So looking at these examples here, you can see that we can import it from next image. So I'm going to copy the import, and here let's go ahead and import it. It's actually imported here, so that's the one we want to use. So instead of us using this regular HTML image, that's the one we want to use. So let's check now. So it crashes and then it tells us the hostname rescloudinary.com is not configured under images in your Next.js. So Next.js needs us to tell it about where we are loading our assets from, such that it can be able to do the optimizations. So I'm going to come here and we take a look at where they talk about that. So here they say to enable image optimizations for images hosted on an external website. In our case, they are hosted on Cloudinary. Use an absolute URL for the SRC and specify domains. So the domains are like the prefixes. So we need to do something like this. So what we can do is we're going to copy this, and we have the next.conf file. So down here, the next.config file. Here is where we want to put the config. So let's bring this one in and let's cut this one out. So we specify images and then the domains. So the domains have to be an array. So in our case, what we need to do is, let's take a look at our error again. So what we need to do is specify res.cloudinary.com as our host name, so where we are getting the images from. So let's go here and replace example.com and this. So Cloudinary has built-in optimization itself, so that makes it a good fit for the Next.js component, and we're going to be seeing what kind of requests Next.js makes to Cloudinary. So once we change things in the config file, we always have to restart the server. So I'm going to stop it. So I'm going to stop this and restart it. So I'm going to run yarn dev again. So let's go ahead and restart it. And now if we come back to our site, let's refresh it. Notice that the images are being shown properly using the Next.js image component. Okay, so for the props that we can send, we have to send the src, which we are doing the width and the height. So there are some optional props. So there's layout, it does the resizing when the device width changes. But if you set fixed, then it's not gonna change. So you take away the responsiveness bit of the component. So for now, this is gonna do. So the next thing we're gonna need to do is, let's talk a little bit about error handling. So let's say we were fetching something that didn't exist, or we got an error fetching this. What you want to do is, since we are using a wait here, we can wrap everything in try catch block. So we're going to do try catch, and I'm going to copy this whole code and take it in the try. So this is something we'd expect to work. But now when we put it in the try, we can't access the data down here. So what we can do is define as a data here. So let data, let's set that one to empty. And then we assign it when we get it. So now that's going to mean we have the data, but how do we send the errors? So what happens when we get an error and we couldn't get the campaigns? So down here, before we return the props, so let's say we don't have any data. So let's say if no data length, so we can return something called a not found. So we can return an object that has a not found key. So you can say return not found. So if we return not found true, so for example here, I'm going to go ahead and make an error here. I'm going to remove this slash here, meaning that this should not work, and save. And that's going to make it that the data array is always going to be empty, meaning that this is going to catch, and this is going to throw, and this is going to be returned. So if we return this here and go back to our application and refresh it, notice that we get a 404 page here. So optimally, this might be something you want to do for some cases. This is not what we want to do in our scenario. In fact, what we want to do is tell the user that there was an error and possibly show that error to the user. So what you can do here is, I'm going to come here, and instead of using this in the catch, so we can go up here and create an error property. So we can say let error, let's set it to null. Okay, so down here when we get an error from fetch, so let's say we couldn't fetch, we can go ahead and assign it to our error. So we can just set it to, we can set error equals the error we just got, and in the props then we can return the error. So instead of us returning done, we are not using it for anything, we can return the error and set that one to the error, to errors. So let me go ahead and do this, and this should also be accessible in the page as errors. So here we can expect it. So let's go ahead and console log it too, and here, so if we have any errors, we are going to do a simple check. So we're going to say if we have errors, then let's go ahead and show them in a paragraph as error like this. So down here we have this as error. So that's what we want to return here. And by the way, when we are using ES6 and above, we don't have to set the values when the value is the same as the key. So we can just abbreviate it by doing it like this. You can see we get that error, so we can't show we can't show an object in a div. So what we can do, so for now, to be able to see what's going on, I'm just going to wrap everything in json.stringify. So let's have json.stringify and put the error in there. So something to point out here, whenever we are returning things in getStaticProps, it has to be of a serializable type. So we want to make sure that our error, the error we are getting from fetch, is something we can work with. So let me console log it, just so we might need to transform it. So here I'm just going to say something went wrong instead, and then we see how to inspect the error and send a varied serialized type to the page in the props. So for now, let's just say something went wrong. So something to mention here, getStaticProps runs only on the server. So that means that whenever we do a console log inside here, it's not going to log in the browser at all. So if we go here and try to look for it here, we won't be able to find it. So what happens is, whenever the code is being run on the server, the console logs, the prints, they all go inside the development server log. So down here, this is where we can find our console log for the error. Okay, so you can see we get fetch error invalid JSON response body at HTTP this unexpected token. So if we wanted to send this, we would go ahead and stringify it and then send it as a string. Say JSON stringify the error like this. So now if we go back to the site, if we go ahead and refresh it, you can see that we get something being shown on the screen. So you can say if we have error.message, then we can go ahead and send that. So error.message, then we can say otherwise. So otherwise, that would mean that the error didn't come from the server. It's not a server generated error. It might be because we couldn't make the request. Then here we can say something went wrong. Okay, like this, or any message you would want to send. So if you come back here and refresh, now this should catch .message. So let's reload it. And you can see that we get the string. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off my internet, so meaning we shouldn't be able to connect to the server. In fact, I should turn the server off. So if we come here and I got my Python and cut it out and go ahead and stop it. So I'm just going to Control C and come back to our Next.js front end and try to reload. We couldn't really make the request, and now this is being sent as the error. And let's correct our error because we don't want to be causing the errors ourselves. And save. Let's refresh. And you can see that our things are back. So the last thing I'm going to be showing you guys is how to use environment variables. So if you go back to our application, you can see that we are setting the base URL inside the code. So what we can do here is we can cut this one away and set this to an environment variable. Use backticks here so we can embed a dynamic variable, and we can do something like to access an environment variable, you can get it from process.env the name of the environment variable. So we have some environment variables that are built in. You can see all these. Now the one we want to access is going to be a base URL. So we are trying to reference an environment variable called the base URL. Now for us to be able to set it, we need to create a file called .env.local. So this gives us environment variables that we can work with in development, and you can see that by default it gets grayed out and removed from Git. So here we can go ahead and set our base URL. So we can do base URL and set it to a value like this and restart it. Okay, so you can see it's going to pick up the environment variables. And now if you go back to the site, so I'm going to come back to the site and refresh it, and you can see that now we are getting things and we are using an environment variable for our API. One thing that I want to show you is all the environment variables we set are only accessible on the server. It makes sense that we're able to access it like this because get static props runs only on the server. So what if we wanted to use this in the browser? So let's say here we add a use effect. In fact, I'm just going to demonstrate that now. So this is a regular React hook and it runs on the browser like you would think. So here, let's say we wanted to console log this. So I'm just going to come and copy this up to here and go to the use effect and console log. And this should of course show in the browser now. So if we come here in the browser, so the base URL is undefined in the browser. So that means that environment variables are not really accessible when you're in the browser environment. They are only accessible on the server side. So what you can do here to be able to access, let's say this environment variable inside the browser is to prefix it with next_public. So we're gonna go to our env.local and prefix this with next_public_. So when we set it like this and go back here, so I'm going to change whatever we have this. So whenever we change something in the environment, we are going to go ahead and restart our server. So I'm just going to stop it, terminate, then restart. So dev. So we have next public underscore base URL. And if we come back here, make sure that's the one we're trying to access in the use effect. So it's going to refresh here. And if we go back to the browser and reload this. So when we change that, you can see that now here, we are getting the base URL in the use effect. So in the browser, we're able to access it now. But notice that our fetcher failed. We can't get from the server again. So we want to go ahead and update that. So let's come back here, and instead of using this, we can now use next public URL and save that. And now if we refresh, so using next_public enables it to be accessible both on the browser and also on the server side. But when we don't prefix with next_public, we can only access these only in the server side. So I'm going to be pausing here. Now in the next one, we're going to be talking about the head component, and also we're going to style our page better to make it look great. So I hope this was helpful. If it was, give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe. I will talk to you in the next video. Hey guys, welcome back. So in this one, let's go ahead and design our page better, give it some modern look and feel, and also fix a few things that are obviously going wrong right now. So first of all, if we take a look at our title right here, our title shouldn't really be this. At least it should be like available campaigns or marketing campaigns or campaign website, something like that. So to be able to change the meta information of an HTML document, we use the head component that Next.js provides. So here we can import the head component, and in any page, so let's say here in any page, we can use that head component, and then inside there we can specify things like the title, things like the description. If we have specified, let's say, a favicon, we can specify it there. If we had other things, let's say specifying like the OG properties. If you're not familiar with what OG is, let me see if I can bring it up. OG is Open Graph Protocol. Yeah, if we have some metadata for the OG, we can specify them there. So that can be OG title, OG type. So these basically are for social media. So if we want to specify some of these, we would do it in the head component. By the way, I love the URL ogp.me. Oh, that's cool. Anyway, so let's go ahead and set our title since we are still basic. Then here, let's say here we want to say campaign manager. We would put that in the head component. And now if we come back to the site and go here, let's refresh it. You can see it has changed already. So now we can change the title. Let's also change the description. And then the value for that is specified in the content. Then let's say a site for campaigns. So this can be anything. Now the details you put here are very useful for search engines. So you want to make sure that your titles are not so long, they are not too short, they make meaning. And also your description, they shouldn't be so long and they should be related to your site. So search engine optimization is a whole block of itself, and I would recommend you take a look at what Next.js provides on that, and also read up mostly on search engine optimization techniques, because you might have to handle it differently regarding on the needs of your site. But Next.js does pretty much a good job out of the box with that. But feel free to explore around, learn some theory about search engine optimization. It's going to be useful for you even on other projects. So this is how we set up the meta information for the page using the head component. So now let's go ahead and style this. So I probably have mentioned this, but Next.js supports different ways to style elements. So by default, we can use CSS modules, and just like regular CSS modules allow us to import like a CSS module or a CSS file as one name, and then we can access the individual style declarations using a dot, and then we use the name of the style object. So let's say here I wanted to have a container here. So what we could do is, instead of saying class name equals container like this, what we can do is we can go in our style file. In this case, we're going to be in the home.module.css, and what makes it a CSS module is having a .module in the naming. So what we can do is we can go to that file. So we're going to go to styles home.module. I'm actually going to remove everything. So let's define the container. So for this container, let's say we wanted to have background color equals green, something like this. And of course, we're going to be changing that, no worries. So here we import the styles. So if you're already familiar with styling React applications, whenever you add a style here and that file is being imported anywhere, that style starts to work across the application. So wherever there is a container wherever there is a style referencing the container, it can go ahead and start to work. But notice that right now nothing is working here. I can actually refresh here, but we can't get that style. So instead of us doing this, we can access it by the style, and then we can call .container on it, and then we can go ahead and close here. Now if we come back to the site, I'm gonna refresh here, you can see it picks up the style. So one thing here I want to show you is, let's inspect this. Notice that the style object is called container, but if you take a look here, you can see that Next.js went ahead and added some random stuff. So Next.js takes care of making sure that our styles are unique and are scoped to different pages and different components. So that is the instance of CSS modules. Kind of helps us to scope different styles. And they do that by adding random text to our styles. So that's how that works. So obviously I'm going to remove this here. We won't be working with it. Similarly, it's not really useful. So let's go ahead and restructure our HTML document and go ahead and style things better. So for the main, we are going to reference a class called main. So here I'm going to have a class name. That's going to be styles.main. And obviously, and this is what is like our container now. So let's go to our module style file, create a container class. And then what we want to do in this one, so here we want to change the background color, and we want to use a dark, create like a dark mode kind of theme. So set that one to this. And now if we take a look, you can see that we have a dark one. So one thing that I don't like is you can see that our main is not really taking off the whole screen. So we're gonna set the height for it. So let's set the height to 100 viewport height. So height, say 100 VH. And that should be able to take off the whole screen. Let's go ahead and set our color to be white. So let's set an overflow. So we can say overflow, let's say overflow scroll. Now, if we come back to our page, you can see that now this is taking off the whole page, which is what we want. And everything is good. So now what we're going to need to do is take everything here. Let's say leave some paddings here on the left and the right. Make it look a little bit neater. So inside our content here, I'm just going to have another div. So you can say div class name. Let's set this one to styles. So it's inner content. So that will contain everything. So I'm going to cut this, make sure we can close. So it's inside the main, so make sure you can close it here. And here, let's style the inner content, so we can do dot. So let's go ahead and reduce the whole width to 70%. Since our background is taking off the whole body, we won't see that it has changed. So what you can do is we are going to display everything in the main as flex and then center everything. So here let's do display flex and say justify content center. And now if we come back again, refresh it, you can see things are in the center, which is great, which is what we want. Okay, so the next thing we're going to need to do is to style the individual items, make them look a little bit better. So I'm going to go to our HTML still, and inside in the map, so inside the map, we're going to create a style here for the items. So we can have a class name equals, let's say styles dot item. Okay, and then let's go ahead and create the styles for this. So inside here, you can have dot item. So for the item, let's change the background a little bit so it can stick out. So background color. Okay, so now if we check again, you can see that this one now sticks out. We have the separation here. So let's go ahead and give it some paddings. So inside the items, we can have padding. Let's set that one to 24 pixels. We need to separate them somehow. So we need to set like a margin for each of them. Actually, let's have a margin top. Let's check that. You can see that separates them out. So we need to create a grid or flex this for the items. So the image goes on the right and then this goes on the left. So we can do that by using grid. So let's have display grid. So when you say display grid, nothing should happen. Let's see. And that's because we haven't really provided the variations of how the children should be laid out in the grid. So we need the image to take off the smallest amount of space possible, and this other content to be on the right and take off the rest. So we can specify grid template columns, and we want the first parent or the first child to be just small, and then we want the last one to take off the whole width. So I'm just assuming a 12 column grid and setting the second child to take off a lot of space or more of the space. So that means that the first child is going to be this image, and the second one is going to be this content. So which is what we want. So if we check again, you can see that it's working the way we want. So the next thing we're going to need to do is to put a margin here, and to also maybe style the dates better and format them better, and maybe make this one round, and we're going to be good to go. So let's go ahead and create a padding left for the second item. So let's go ahead and create a class here. So class name, and we're going to do a styles.write items. So for this, you can just copy this inside home, then down here you can have write items, and basically what we need is to specify a margin left. So let's set that to 24 pixels. So if we check that, you can see that we got the space. So going forward, we need to style the image to be in the center. So we are going to be giving it a margin auto, so and also make it round. So let's go ahead and add a class for it. So let's do here .img. So we want it to have a border radius of 100%, and VS Code kind of generates for me this other browser specific border radius specs. So let's come here and set this to the image. So we can say class name equals, take a look, does that help? And that makes it round, which is what we want. So putting it in the center, we need to position auto the parent. So this here, let's give it a class. So class name equals styles.img container. So let's set that. So you can do margin auto, and you can see that it goes to the center. So we can use date format to be able to format dates. So this is a lightweight module that gives us a function that can format date. So you can see it gets 6 million downloads a week. Oh my goodness, which is a lot for a reason, I believe. So down here, let's go ahead and install it. So we can do npm install. So we can just come here and install it. So we can just do, let me bring up the console. I'm actually going to create a new terminal window. cd into our front end. So now that's going to give us the date format utility. So to use that, we want to go to our file, which is index, and just import it, date format. Okay. So now where we are displaying the dates, we can just come in and say, so we want to get our date, pass it into the new date object, and then we want to format it. So to format it, we want to pass this to the format dates function. So the first parameter is the date, and then the second one is the format. So here, let's put a comma. So for the format, we can go ahead and specify the format. We are going to get the day. Let's put a comma. Let's get the month. Let me first bring it up. Then we're going to see how it formats it. So the year, let's have a comma. Let's have the hour, the minutes, the seconds. So now, if we come back to our application, let's go back to campaign manager. You can see that it changes really. You can see that it changes to the way we want. So we have, so the formats here, we can get more, we can learn more about the formats here on the library. So you can see this on the library page. You can see the formats here, and you should be able to almost do any format you want to do with it. So feel free to take a look here if you want to use this in the future. So let's style this one. Let's make this one small because it shouldn't look like the paragraph. And coming back, you can see that now it is, yeah, pretty cool actually. So that's going to do it for now. In the next one, we're going to start talking about routing, how we can route using the link component, how we can use the hooks, the routing hooks, and how we can work with dynamic routes. So it's going to be interesting. If you enjoyed this one, give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe. I'll talk to you later. Hey guys, what's up? So let's go ahead and explore the details of navigation in Next.js. So the primary way to navigate on the web, of course, is using the A tag. So we usually have the A and then the href that goes where we want a user to go. And in libraries like React Router DOM, we have a link component. So in Next.js, we have this a similar one, but of course this time we import it from next/link. And this gives us client-side routing, and we can use this instead of the regular A. So one of the best features for this link here is that whenever your page renders, Next.js goes through the page and picks out all the referenced links, and it does a prefetch of those pages. So by the time a user clicks on it, then it has already prefetched the data for the corresponding page, and that's why things happen very fast. So scrolling down here, you can see the props you can pass. Now you can see there is a prefetch prop that is true, and that makes the functionality we're talking about possible. So also we have the router. So the router gives us some hooks that we can use to handle navigation related tasks. So in this one, let's go ahead and see how to navigate to the detail page and how to pick the parameters on the detail page so we can fetch again for the detail of the campaign. Earlier we saw that we can navigate using the href and the link to these ones. But in this case, we want to be going to a dynamic page. So whenever we click Next.js conf, we want to go to something like /test flag, and that's going to be different depending on what the user clicks. So what we want to do is we want to define a dynamic URL. So at this point in time in the pages, we are going to create a slag.js, and we're going to put it inside this syntax here. So this means that this is going to be the placeholder for whatever the page will be viewing, and that's going to be based on the slag. So whenever we go to /certain slag, the page is going to be generated here dynamically. So we want to use JS, So now if we come here, we can create a component and it should work as a page. So down here, I'm just going to say campaign, and to be able to link to this page like normal, we want to go to our listing index, and where we have the title, so where we are displaying the title, which is here, we are going to turn that into an A, and like we saw, we need to wrap everything inside the link component. So this is going to enable us to achieve client-side routing and pretty much get all the benefits that the link component provides. So we're going to move that inside and then specify where we are going to navigate to. We specify the href prop. So let's set the href prop to be, we want to do / and then let's go ahead and concatenate there the slag. So element.slag. So now we can come back to the browser. You can see that we get Next.js conf. When I hover above, you can see down, it goes to /next.js-conf. This one goes to /datefetching class. So when I click on it, you can see that it navigates. So now, one thing I want to show you is how to use the router to navigate programmatically. So let's say we want to navigate when a user maybe clicks on the parent element. So let's say a user clicks on this div here. So let's go ahead and add an onClick. So we're going to do onClick. So whenever a user clicks this, we're going to call a function that's going to handle the navigation. So I'm going to call it handle navigation. And whenever we call this function, we're going to be passing in the item that was clicked on. So let's go ahead and pass the element. So let's go ahead and, so we're going to need to wait for the user to click. So let's go ahead and call this on click. So down up here, let's create that function. So we're going to have const handle navigation. Obviously it takes in the element, so we're going to go ahead and destructure the slag from it. And what we need to do is navigate to the item with this slag. So the way we can do that is by using the use router hook. So here, what we can do is we can get the router by defining it. So const router. Then we want to call use router. So use router comes from next/router. So here let's import it. So import, since it's a named export, we can just pick it by use router. Then we want to do from next/router. So with this, we can be able to navigate by calling push on it. So you can think of this as the history object that's available in the browser. And let's go to the documentation, just so you guys know where to find extra information. So this is the use router hook. We can be able to navigate by writing push. And let's take a look. On details, we can pick the path names or query to be able to do like a fetch for the detail or something like that. So we have router push. This is what we want to do. To be able to navigate to the page with this item, you can just do router dot push So we want to go to slash, then we want to go to slash the slug, so just slug like this. All right, so now if we come here, I'm just gonna go here, refresh it. Now I want to click on the title, but I will click anywhere around here. So I'm gonna click here. Notice that it navigates the same way it would navigate when we click here. Then navigation that is triggered by the click on the link is the same as the one that is triggered when we click somewhere on the component. So it is also client side, so which is also pretty fast. So now I'm going to show you how to pick which one was clicked on the detail page. So to be able to know which one we navigated to is here where we have the slug. We can just do use router again. So here let's do const router equals use router. I'm going to console log the router just so we see what we are working with. And like we said, it is a client, it runs client side. So since it runs client side, we should be able to see it in the browser. So now if we go back here, I'm going to bring up our browser tools. So in the console, and inside there we have all these properties. So the path we are going to need to get is in the query. So what we can do here is we can just destructure query from use router. So we can just say query like this, and we need to get the slug from that. So we can just do slug like that. And if we now console log the slug, just switch this for the slug and come back to the browser, refresh it. Inside here, you should be able to see that it's undefined at first, but then when it loads, we get the slug. So if we go to a different one, let's say we go to one that's not nextconf, just go to data fetching class. You can see that we get data fetching class here. So in the next one, we're going to be looking at how to use get static paths and get static props to prefetch the details pages at build time. So if this one helps you out, give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll talk to you in the next video. Hey guys, welcome back. So last time we were able to fetch a list of campaigns from our backend, and we can display them here on our frontend. And we used a method called getStaticProps. So like we said, the reason why we used getStaticProps is we would want this to be called at build time, such that we can fetch all the data for this page at build time. Now, when we go to the detail page, we would want to do the same thing. So we would want this page to be fetched at build time, and the HTML pre-rendered already with the data. So normally with this kind of detail routing on the web, we would have to, let's say, come on this page when this page has rendered, pick the slug, and then make a call to get the data. But with the kind of approach we want, where we want all the data to be fetched at build time, that approach will not work because there won't be any user to click any buttons. Now, Next.js supports us at being able to achieve pre-rendering of all the detail pages for all our items on this list by giving us an implementation for a method called getStaticPaths. So what getStaticPath does is it goes ahead and makes a call to our server and then returns all the slugs that are on the server. And then Next.js can use each of those slugs to generate the individual pages for that campaign. So to implement this, we're going to go to the slug. Now, first, we're going to first implement the getStaticPath function. And that should be the one that returns for us all the slugs on our server that we would want to fetch data for and pre-render. So here, we need to export. It has to be an async function. So export async function. You have to call it getStaticPath like this. So inside this function, we're going to go ahead and make the same call we did here. So we're going to make this call here to fetch the data. So what I'm going to do is to actually copy this and bring it to here, because it's going to be the same call, but the difference is now we want to only get the slugs. We don't care about the images, everything, because this function should return the slugs, which will be a substitute for the page itself. So here we're going to fetch. Now, when we fetch, we get the data. So I'm going to do a const. And also getStaticPaths runs on the server. So here I'm going to console log this, and I'm going to console log the data. So this is going to give us a list like this. So it's going to be an array with each of these objects. But what we want is to only get the array of slugs. So the way we can do that is here, since this is going to be containing all of these, we are just going to strip out everything we don't need and only use the slug. So we can use a map function for that to manipulate the contents of an array. So here let's have const all slugs. So this is going to be the data. Then we're going to call map. So map gives us each item in a callback function, and we can now just return the slug. So for each of the items, we are only going to pick the slug, and map gives us the array of all the objects that gets enumerated from this map function. This should be able to give us the slugs. So something like slug A, slug B, slug C. So now the return from the get static path should follow a format that has a params key and then the slug itself. So something like this. So we should be able to, in get static path, we should be able to return an array, and that array should contain objects like this. And each of those objects should have a key called params, and that's going to be an object also. And then in the object there can be the slugs. So something like this. So slug is going to be a slug. Now, since we already have the slugs, what we can do is we can still map over these, and inside each of these, we embed there the key for params and set the value to the slug itself. So here we can just have return. We're just going to do all slugs. Then we want to map. So this is now going to give us each slug. So what we want to return, params, and the value is going to be the slug like this. Okay, so this is going to give us now our paths. So what we need to return from the function will be the paths. So we're going to say const these paths. So will be the paths. So here we can return an object that has path in them, and we can specify another property here called fallback. So I'm going to say fallback equals false. So right here, we could be able to supply false, true, and broken. And the difference between these options here are that whenever you supply false, Next.js is only going to update the data when you rebuild again. But we could be able to supply true or blocking, and that would enable Next.js to create fallback pages for when a user tries to access a campaign that was not generated at build time. And also there is a feature called incremental static site generation, but we won't be getting much into that. So for now, we will only expect Next.js to work with the data that it builds at build time and not having to expect it to prefetch other pages that don't exist. So let's keep this. Now, whenever we implement get static path, that means that Next.js is going to know about all our slugs. And right now, what we need to do is we need to fetch data for each of those paths. Last time we saw that if we want to fetch data at build time, we can implement get static props. And this is what we want to implement now. So I'm going to copy get static props. And down here, we will have get static props. And basically, what happens is whenever we are on a dynamic route or a dynamic page like this, Next.js is going to check if we have get static paths. Now, when we have get static path, this function is going to be called for each of those paths, and the data is going to be fetched for each of them. And whenever we have get static path, each of those paths is available in the get static props function, and it's available as a prop, so we can get it here. So the path is passed in here as params. Now with this, we can be able to access each individual slug. So you can see here we can be able to do params.slug, and it's going to be called for each of the items that are returned in the path. So here we can now do a call to our backend, to this endpoint here for the detail, and get this data, and get static props will pass it to our page, and the page can get it as props. So let's go ahead and make a call. So I'm going to come here and make a call like this. So this time we are going to be fetching the detail. So we're going to be using here params.slug. Since our path has the params key and then the slug inside, so it's going to be accessed like this. And this is going to go ahead and make the HTTP call. So we expect to get the data here. So you can say const data equals this. Now we can return props. Like we said in get static props, we need to return props like this. So we can return props. And for now, we are just going to send the data to our page. So now, if we go to our page here, we can expect to get that data. And down here, if we console log the data, we should be able to get it. So if we go to our website and refresh and open up the Chrome console, I'm actually going to minimize this and go to the console. So if we refresh, you can start to get the data being logged inside here, meaning that we are able to fetch the data using these functions here. If we open up our Chrome console and click on one of these, so notice when I click on one of these, we didn't go ahead to make a call to the server. We didn't. So if you take a look here, you can see all the requests go to port 3000. So the data is gotten and then it's cached inside the _next_data. But this is in development, but this kind of shows you that the data is going to be prefetched and we're not going to be making like calls to the server when we use this approach. So now that we have the data, we can go ahead and display it in the UI. So for now, we will show the image. So I'm going to go here. So I'm just going to copy our item. So I'm going to copy the whole div and bring it in here. So we'll go here. We have campaign. We're going to remove this, expand this. So we'll have the container. Then we will have the description and the title. So let's remove one of these divs and save. So now the data is the object. So here where we were using element, we're going to change that to use data. And of course, we don't want to route here, so we can remove the on click. We need to import styles. So for now, I'm going to use the styles that we were using for the home. And then in the next one, we're going to be styling the next page. We are going to be styling the detail page better. So now if you come back to the site, I'm going to refresh it. We need to import image from image link. So let's copy this. Make sure we are importing image. So now let's also import link. We might have to use it to go back. So let's get it down here, save, come back. Date format, let's import date format also, since we are formatting the data and the detail. Let's come back here. And you can see that our data is being displayed. So this is how we set up the ability to fetch data for dynamic routes using getStaticPath and also getStaticProps. So that's going to do it for this one. If it helps you out, give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll talk to you in the next video. Hey guys, welcome back. So in this one, I'm going to go ahead and continue building our Next.js front end. So last time we stopped off when we had created a detailed page and it's looking like this. So what we'll be doing now is transform this page here to look like this. So this is going to be the ultimate CSS tutorial. So we're going to be covering some advanced concepts in CSS, things like creating different layers on a page. If you take a look at the background, you will see that it's an image, but that image is brown. So we're going to have to create a background layer, and then we're going to create this layer on top that has the content. So it's going to be an interesting one. If you're someone who is passionate about CSS and you want to know how to build a UI like this, then stick around. So to start, we want to first fix our title, the head metadata information. So just up here, let's just have a head. So we want to do head, and then let's pass the title. So yeah, we're going to do title. So for the title, we are going to use the title of our campaign. So that's going to be in data.title. So here we can just display a dynamic string. So it's going to be data.title. So let's make sure the head is being imported. So I'm going to go up here and import head. So import head from next head. Okay, so now if we come back here, you can see that our title is being used up here. Let's set the meta description for the page. So we want to do meta name equals description. Then let's set the content. So content, we're just going to use the dynamic description that we have on this very campaign. It's going to be data.description. Now we are going to go ahead and start creating the background layer, the one that has that darkish and then the image as a background. So here I'm just going to have a div called wrapper. So here we're going to have a div. So this div is going to have a class name. So it's going to be class. So we're going to do styles.wrapper. And to style this, last time we included the style that was coming in from the home.module.css, but now we are going to be including one that is going to be detail.module.css. So just go ahead and create it in styles. So over here, we're just going to do a new file. It's going to be detail.module.css. Let's start styling the wrapper. So like we said, we are now creating the background layer that will have the darkish and then the image. So the first thing we're going to need to do is set its height to be full screen and also disable the scroll. So we're going to do height. We're going to do 100 viewport height. So you can see that now, just creating this and giving it a style of 100 VH, it takes off all the visible height of the page. So let's go ahead and give it a background color. So here I'm just going to do background color, and I'm going to use 001101, 001101, and save. Now if you come back, you can see it takes off the whole screen. But notice that we can scroll down. So what we want is to prevent the scroll. So how do we prevent the scroll? There are different ways we can do it, but we're just going to position this fixed. So we're going to do position fixed like this. When we set position fixed, then we want to give constraints like the width. So over here, I'm going to specify width 100%. So I'll do width 100% and save that. And when we come here, you can see now it's taking off 100%. So the next thing we're going to want to do is give it a Z index, because like I said, we're going to be creating two layers. This one we are creating now, and the other one that we have content that's going to be directly in front of the user. So let's give it a Z index. So if you're not familiar with the Z index, what it does is it enables us to position things on top of each other on a web page. So let's give this one 1, and the one with a higher Z index is the one that is close to the user. So now that we have this one done, let's go ahead and see how we can add the background image. So what I'm going to do here is inside the wrapper, I'm going to have another div. So this div, we are going to give it a class of main, so styles.main. So for now it's going to be empty, and let's go ahead and style it and position our image in there. So we're going to go here and do .main. So here what we want is to of course give a background image and make sure that this is taking off the whole height. So I'm going to do background image, and then I'm going to bring in this pixels image here. So when I click on it, you can see it opens here. Now I'm going to leave this link in the description just so you guys can copy it. So now once we set it as a background image and go back here and refresh, you can see that nothing is happening. That's because we need to specify other things. So one of the things we're going to need to specify is the position. So we want to position it absolute. So we're just going to do position absolute, and then position absolute lets us specify exactly where we want it to go. So we want it to be start on the top, so we're going to do top 0. Let's give this a height and a width. So for the height, we are going to need it to take 100% of the parent. Then for the width, we are also going to need it to take 100% of the parent. So let's save that, and now when we come here, you can see that we have our background. It's already looking great. Okay, so one thing we don't want is we want it to be just one. We don't want it to repeat. So here we can just do background repeat. So we don't want it to repeat, so we can do no repeat. Save that, and now you can see it's 1. So one thing you will see here is this is not taking off the whole screen, and it is getting stuck on the top left. So if you want it to be in the center and taking off the whole screen, you're going to need to specify the background position and also the background size. So let's specify background size first. So we're going to make it cover everything, the container. So we're just going to do that. Also, let's specify the background position. So background position. So we want it to be center vertically, center horizontally, and save that. So now if you come here, you can see it goes in the center. It's not covering. Let's check over here. This should be size. So background size, cover, save that. Coming here, you can see it takes off the whole page. So at this point, we have not achieved the effect we would want. So you can see this effect is dimmed, it's calm. So on the image, let's go ahead and set the background color and also set some opacity. So you're going to have background color. So for this, it's going to be dimmed one. So it's going to be 001101. I believe we used that somewhere. So also let's set the opacity. So we can do opacity. Then let's set the opacity to 0.08. Save that. Now when we come back, then you can see that now we have the dim effect and things are now looking calm. Okay, so to get started building out the upper layer, let's actually start with the footer here, because it's gonna be tricky to also position it down. So because it's also gonna need some work to position it down. So we're gonna go in our JSX and we will go at the bottom. So at the bottom we're gonna have the footer. So I'm gonna have footer here. So for this footer, we're just gonna have a link that goes to the previous page. So we can have href equals the default route, and then inside here, you know, we need to specify an A, and then the A has to have a text. So you can say go back to list. But since we are positioning everything absolute, we need to also handle its positioning. So let's give it a style here. So we're gonna have class name equals styles dot footer. So we want it to be positioned absolute because we want to control where it goes. So position absolute, we want it to be at the bottom, so we're just going to do bottom 0. All right, let's do left 0. Let's also do right 0, just so we know it has to go on the bottom. So let's give it a width of 100%, just so it takes off the whole width. So, and also let's make the content there white, so it's not showing up because our background layer still has the Z index of 1. So we need to specify a specific Z index that is higher than the background layer, just so it can appear on the top. So we have Z index, so Z index, let's give it a 2. And now if we come back here, you can see it's appearing down here. So we actually want it in the center, and also want to give it some border top. So here, let's give it a border top. So the border is going to be 1 pixel solid white or wheat, and now you can see that gives it the border. So we want everything to actually go in the center, so we can just flex everything. So display flex, and then center everything, justify content center. So that puts things in the center, which is what we want. Now we're gonna need to give this some paddings, but the easiest way we can do this is giving it a specific height. So we're gonna do 100 pixels for the height. And since we want it to go to the center, we want to align items also. So align items center, just so it is centered both vertically and horizontally. Now we can move on to creating our left and right content. Now to create this, the image is going to be on its own line, and then we're going to have this content on the left and this on the right, so we can flex everything and also control the responsiveness. And after the main, so the main was used to control the image layer. So here we can have another div to hold the content. So we're going to do div class name equals styles.content. So I'm just going to do contents, and then inside here, then we can have an image first. So just going to copy this. So I'm just going to cut it out. So now we are creating a newer design and put it there. When I come back, you can see it appears there. So we are going to need to style the contents first. So I'm going to get the contents class and bring it here. So contents. So for the contents, let's make sure everything is 100%. So we can just do width 100%. So let's give it some paddings, both horizontally and also vertically. So we can just have padding here. So top and bottom, we can have like a 7 rem, then left and right, we have like a 10 rem. Save that, and that's gonna push things in the middle a bit. So let's style the image very quick, because I don't like the way it's looking now. So let's give it a border radius of 100%. So border radius 100%. Let's go here, give it a class. It actually has a class, so that's good. That's already taken care of. Okay, so the next thing we're going to need to do is, after the image, then we are going to have like a grid that's going to have content, this content on the left and this content on the right. So after the image, then we are going to have a div class name. So this one is going to be a grid, so we're going to call it grid. So styles.grid. Let's also have left and right. So here we can have div class name equals styles.left. So I'm gonna duplicate this to get the right one. So this is gonna be .right. So the title and the description are gonna go on the left. So I'm just gonna come here, copy the title and description. I'm just gonna cut this. So in the left, I will move the title there, but this time the title is not gonna be inside the A, so it's gonna be inside an H1. Just gonna have H1 there. Let's get rid of this. Then the description can keep in the P. So let's give the title a class of title, then the description the similar one of description. So here we're going to do styles.title. Then here we'll have description. So in the right one, we're going to have a form. So here, let's have a div. I'm just going to list another one here called right contents. So inside here, now we can have like a dummy form, which we can later style. So I'm going to have a form here. We are going to have a div that contains this input here, and also the one that will contain the button details, and also this with respect to your privacy. So here, let's have a div class name. So for this one, we can just set the class name to form group, and we're going to style this as we go. Then here, let's have the input. So input, the type is going to be email. We want it to have some validations built in. Although we're going to be validating it even using JavaScript. So let's give it a name. So name can be email. We are not going to be handling things like on change right now. We are going to handle those in a separate video. So let's have a placeholder. So placeholder here will be enter an email. Alright, so let's give it a class name because you're going to need to style it. So class name equals styles.input. So we're going to have a button submit here. It's going to look quite similar. It's going to be an input. But for this class, we can set this one to submit. And here it's going to be an input type. So the input type is going to be submit. And then we want to specify the value. So here we can say value, and then the value can be something like subscribe. So for the classes, we'll have a specific one called button. All right, and also let's have this text here. You see this text for we respect your privacy and subscribe anytime. Let's also have it here. So I'm gonna do P. I'm gonna do a P. Then we have we respect your privacy. Okay, I guess that's pretty much it. Let's take a look at what we have. So when we come here, you can see that we have things, but they are not quite visible properly. We can start styling this and maybe changing the colors to be white and positioning things from left to right. So you know we have the left and then the right. So let's go ahead and style the left here. So I'm gonna do .left, and we are just going to want it to take off 50% of its parent. So we did 50%. Also, let's set the color for the contents here. So color white. Let's also style the right to take off 50%. So one thing here is we want to flex everything. We want to flex the left and right to be aside each other. So we want to get its parent and style that. So here we have the right. So this is the right, and this is the left. So the parent is the grid. So here we're gonna have a grid. So dot grid. Now we can make this flex. So display flex. So if I save this and come here, you can see that now this is on the right. So now let's focus on the right content here. We want to give it some margin on the left. So inside the right, we have another div that is called right contents. So we can start from this one. So here we can have right contents. Let's have a margin left. So let's have 6 rem units here, and that's going to give it some space. So now let's start making this input a bit better. So what we want is, let's first grab the form group, which is the div that holds it. Let's give it some margin on the bottom. That's going to do 15 pixels, and you can see we have some space there. So for the input, so we are just giving it a font size. We are giving it a font size, and this goes ahead to affect the placeholder and the text that the user enters. So we also change the color of the text that the user enters. So we give it a background of height, we give it some paddings, we give it a border of a whitish border. So let me remove the flex. And most importantly, we give it the height that goes ahead to give it this height. So if we made it bigger, actually, wanted to make it look bigger, we give it like 85, and then looked like a placeholder there. So this looks good. Now let's style the button. So the styles for the button are actually going to be simple. Remember we gave it a button, I believe. So I'm going to do button here. Then I'm going to put in these classes here. I don't want to type them because it's the same thing. So we give it a color of white. We give it a background of, we give it this background so it stands out. Now this is how it's going to look. So we are getting there. Now let's go ahead and style the we respect your privacy to make it look smaller. So if we check the class we gave it here, we need to give it a class. So class name styles, let's call it consent. So for this we can go ahead and the font size of 11 pixels. Let's give it a color like a grayish color. So let's have 787878. Save that, and we need to save this one too. And you can see that now it looks like this. Yeah, looks good to me. So we are done actually. What we need to do is make sure it's responsive. So for the responsiveness, I'm just going to bring in this media query. So down here in the styles, I'm just going to press these styles here. So whenever the screen width goes below 1024, we go ahead and change the flex direction of this build, an Uber clone, and this form here to become column, meaning that this is going to get stuck, this is going to be moved to the bottom. We also go ahead and reduce the paddings here by like a half. Then we go ahead and make this one to take off 100%. The left, so in this case the left was build an Uber clone and then this description. So we make it take off 100%, and we also make the right take off 100%. And then down, whenever the user goes on the smallest devices, these are like the smallest, we go ahead and hide away the description, just so we can keep the 100% viewport height and we don't enable the scroll. And that's just something you can change depending on how you want to do it. But now if I save this and come here and open this, and I'm just going to come down, you can see what happens here is whenever we leave 1024, we go ahead and make the flex direction column and we change the width from 50 to 100, both for the right and the left. And then when we go down, and then when we go maximally down, we go ahead and hide away the description. So you can switch this to the way you want, but one thing I wanted you guys to take away is how you can create different layers, so you can create some designs that kind of look unique. So one thing here is I'm not able to focus on the input or even click the button, and that's because the background layer still has the Z index of 1, and since our contents don't have a Z index that is higher, then we can't go ahead and do interactions because it is behind this background layer. So what you can do here is on the contents. So for the contents, we can just have a Z index of 2 since the background has the Z index of 1. So we're going to set the Z index, and also we need to position it absolute just so it goes in front. So position absolute, and now if you come, you can see we can focus it. One thing I don't like about this input is when we focus it, it gets that highlight. So we can remove that by targeting the focus pseudo selector. So we can have input, then focus. So when focused, we can remove the outline. So we can do outline none. All right. Another thing is when we hover above the submission button, we can change the color a bit. So we can also target the button. We can also target the button hover pseudo class. So dot button hover. Then we can change the background color a bit. I'm going to change it to this, and now you can see when I hover we get that effect, which I think looks pretty cool. Last time we styled our detail page a little bit better, so in this one we're going to go ahead and submit an email and create a subscriber in our database. So we're going to be hitting this endpoint here called subscribers. So we're going to be making a post request to the subscribers route or subscribers endpoint, and we're going to need to specify the email that the user provides and also the campaign that they are subscribing to. So whenever we click on a campaign, so here when I click on build an Uber clone, this campaign details or the ID also is available in the detail page, and we're going to be using that. So now let's go ahead and see how we can pick the email whenever a user enters it, and also we can handle the submission. So our submission, we are going to keep it simple. We're actually going to use HTML5 validation. So where we have the input for the email, the type is already email, but now you can see that if we come here, I'm just going to remove this, go afresh and submit. You can see that it doesn't check, it just submits. So what we want is to actually prevent it if the user hasn't entered the email. So you can specify a required attribute. So now if you come and try to submit, you can see it doesn't rate us and it wants us to fill the field. Obviously on the backend we have the validation to make sure that the email is going to be there and it's going to be valid. So here if we enter the text, you see we still have to enter a valid one, and we can't submit before we enter a valid one. So that's just going to do the validation for us, so no worries. Let's handle how to pick the email whenever a user enters it. So we are going to have to keep some local state to be able to persist what the user is entering. So here I'm just going to have a const. So we're going to have email, set email. So we're going to use the use state hook to keep track of our email state, and we're going to start out our email as empty. So whenever a user changes something, so whenever a user enters something in the email, we're going to have an on change. So on change, So the onChange, you're going to have a function to handle the onChange. So we'll have an event here. Now, whenever a user enters something there, we can pick the newest value from event target value, and we want to update our email like this. So we're going to say set email to event target value. Okay, so now I'm going to go here and console log the email just to see if our onChange is working. So let's console log it. So we need to import use state. So we're gonna go here and import use state. It's a named export. So now if you come here, let's get the console. I'm going to expand this one a little bit. So here I'm going to start typing there something. So I'm going to do test@gmail.com, and you can see that our email is being logged here. So meaning we are able to capture it. So now let's go ahead and handle when a user submits. So we're going to have a function. So whenever a user submits, the form calls an onSubmit, and we need to provide a handler for it. So here we're going to have onSubmit, and we are just going to have a function called onSubmit. I'm just going to call it handle onSubmit, and let's create this function. So I'm going to go top here and have const onSubmit equals, so this gets the event. So whenever the form is being submitted, by default it is going to be making a get request. So you can see it's going to do something like this. So we don't want it to behave that way, so we can use this event to prevent the default behavior for when a form is submitted. So once that happens, then we can go ahead and handle this our way. So what we want is to basically make a request and save this email to our backend. So the endpoint you're going to hit is this. It's called, so here I'm just going to try to submit this. So the endpoint is called /API/subscribers. So I'm just going to get /subscribers because we already have this in an environment, the base URL in an environment variable. So here what you can do is, since you're using fetch, you can first define our options. So these are going to be request options. So we're going to have a method of post. So method post. So here now we can have a fetch. So fetch takes in the URL. So we're going to use this syntax here to bring in a dynamic URL from the environment and to also concatenate there the subscribers. So we can do process.env.next public base URL. I hope that's how we called it. We'll check. And then we want to concatenate there. So we can put their subscribers like this. Okay, so the first one is where we want to make the request to. Then we can specify the options. So we can specify our options there. Now, since we are going to be making a post request, we need to send some data to the server, of course. So here you can specify the body. So since our backend accepts JSON, we need to create a JSON string and send that instead of our JavaScript object that's going to have an email and also the campaign. So here we'll have JSON stringify. So what do we want to stringify? We want to stringify the email and also the campaign. So at this point in time, our campaign is going to be data.id, and for the email we would have to specify it like this, but since the key and the value have the same names, then we can just keep one of them. It's going to behave similarly. Another thing we can specify is the headers, so things like the content type. But let's first try this. So whenever we make a fetch, we'll get a promise. So we can do .then. So the first .then is sent from an initial request that is not actually the one that has what the server responded to. So what we want to do with the first response is to actually transform it to JSON, and then the data is going to be in another .then. So we can chain another .then. So here we can expect to have a response from the server, and we're just going to console log it for now. So let's console log response, and also if there are any errors, let's go ahead and handle them. So you can do .catch. So let's do error. Let's console log them for now. And now if you come back to our web page, so I'm just going to enter an email and click. Notice that by default we are not able to make the request. We are not able to make the post request, and we get the error saying failed to fetch. They are telling us that the request has been blocked by CORS policy. We didn't specify the access control origin. So what you can do here is specify some headers. So I'm gonna go here and have headers. So for these headers, we'll specify the content type to be application JSON. So what we can do here is we're gonna go to the server and enable requests coming from this localhost port 3000. So we're gonna be using a module called Django CORS headers. So Django CORS headers, and install it. So we're just gonna do pip install Django CORS headers. So we'll go to our backend. So this is our Python server. I'm going to stop it and install this. So let's go ahead and include this in our installed apps, and we're going to be seeing how to use it as we go. So let's include it here. Then the next thing we're going to need to do is add its middleware. So we are encouraged to add the middleware before the common middleware. So just going to come here and get it right here. Now the next thing we're going to need to do is specify allowed origins. So I'm going to copy this, and anywhere around here I will specify CORS allowed origins. So we want port 3000 to connect to our server. So also we can just use the domain instead of the IP. And once we deploy the front end, we're going to have to update this to also accept the front end. But for now, let's remove this. So let's go back to our front end and try again. So here I'm going to try making the same request. Notice that we update this. Notice that our record is saved on the server, so we get it sent back to us. So since both these servers are on localhost, you can see it's pretty fast, but sometimes we may have a delay. So we want to disable the button when we are loading, and also show a success message once we submit successfully. So how do we do that? So in the front end, we are going to have to maintain some state for the form submission. So we're going to have const. I'm going to have one called submitted. Set is submitted. It's going to start out as false, as you may imagine. Let's also have the loading state. So when we are submitting state, so const submitting, set is submitting. We also start out as false. So now here, once we start to save, so once we start to make the call, so before the fetch itself, we can set is submitting to true. And whenever we finish submitting or we get an error, we can update it to, we can update the is submitting. By the way, there is a finary, so we can also catch finary. So this is called regardless of if things were successful or not. So you can see here, this is called when the promise is settled by being rejected of a field. So whatever happens, this gets called after. So here we can just set is submitting. What is that? How do you call it? Set is submitting, yeah. So here we set is submitting to false again, and also we want to handle. We also want to handle is submitted. So you can see that by default it's gonna be false. Now whenever we submit, we'll change that to true. So we're gonna go here in the .then. So we don't wanna log here. We are sure it's gonna work. Just gonna get a block here and write some code there. So we're gonna set is submitted here to true. So once we submit successfully, then we wanna give the user a thank you message. So where we have the form right here, we are only gonna show the right contents only when the user has not submitted. So here we're just gonna have if not is submitted. So if we have not submitted, then we are gonna go ahead and show the form. But if we have submitted, so here we can have an or. So let's have a div here. So here we can just have a thank you message. So right now I'm gonna have a class name. This is gonna be styles.thank you. And inside here, we basically want to show an icon. So here I have React icons app. So we want to show a check icon just so a user sees the green. So we're gonna have to install React icons. So npm install React icons. So I'm going to be using yarn, of course. So I'll switch to my front-end server and do yarn add React icons. Inside our thank you div, we're just going to have an icon and also the text that says thank you. So div class name equals styles.icon, and the icon is going to go there. Then let's also have another div that's going to have the text, the success text or the thank you text. So here let's have thank you for your subscription. So now that we have this, then we can spin up our server again, but we need to import the icons and also use the icons. So React icons comes with very many icon sets, so you can choose from very many, so it's likely that you're always going to find the icon you want from these. So what we want to do is we want to import the check one, so we're going to import it from Font Awesome. So whenever you're importing icons, you want to import from a specific icon set. So you can see there's Font Awesome, Anti-Design, Game Icons, Hero Icons, Icon Moon, Ionic Icons, Material. I can name but a few. So here, let's get the import. So we want to import from Font Awesome. So React Icons /FA. And the one we want is going to be the FA check circle. So FA check that one. All right, and we can use it as a regular React component. So down here we can just render the component. All right, so we can specify props like size. So size, let's set that one to 17, and we're going to see how that would look. Let's also give it a color. So the color is going to be a green one. So green. So let's go ahead and see what we have. Gonna go back here. It's gonna refresh. So we have some typos, I believe. So it's submitted. Oh, we called it submitted. I'm gonna change that to submitted. And also, whenever we are submitting, we want to disable the button. So we want to disable the submit button. So if you are submitting, then we want to say please wait, and also disable the button. So we can say disabled equals when we are submitting. All right, so coming back here, it's gonna refresh. Let's try to submit this. Click submit. You can see it submits and we get a thank you message. So let's style the thank you a little bit better. We want to flex it left and right, give it a background of white, and maybe make some things a little bit bigger. But you can see, you can get where we are going right now. So let's see how we group this. So we have a div thank you. So we're gonna go to our detail module before the media queries. Let's have thank you. Let's make it bigger and flex this. So we're gonna, so let's give it a height. Let's do something like 400 pixels, width 100% of the container. Then let's have display flex, just so they are left and right. Let's center everything, justify content center, align items center. I love doing that. Anyway, so this goes in the center. We don't want it to be so big, so let's make it 200. All right, looks good. So for the message, if we check here, you can see the message. Let's change this one to message. Want to give it some padding left, so dot message padding left 12 pixels, and let's save here. You can see we get that. So let's give the background, so the whole layout, let's give it a background. So background color to white, and you can see that. So for the message, let's give it a dark color. So color, I believe it's quite, I believe it's the height is a bit large, but you get the gist. Let's give it some border radius, and yeah. So also let's give it some margin on the right because it's kind of stuck there. So margin on the left, 24 pixels. Let's see what one does. And yeah, anyway, so this is how it looks. I'm gonna refresh here just so we get a new flow. So you come here, choose an email, click subscribe, we get the subscription success. So that's gonna do it for now. So in the next video, I'm gonna be showing you guys how to deploy the applications. So thanks guys for watching. If you enjoyed it, give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll talk to you in the next video. So we have our REST API here. We also have our admin where we can go and manage campaigns and also subscriptions. So now let's go ahead and deploy our Django backend to Heroku, and then we're going to be deploying the front end in the next one. So Heroku is a managed service. So they give us the infrastructure. They also give us other add-ons or other resources like a database. So they do heavy lifting for our deployment for us. So to deploy our Django application to Heroku, we are going to be using a module called Django Heroku. We also are going to have to use GUnicorn. So that's going to be our server. So let me bring it up. Also, we are going to work with something called white noise. So white noise will be responsible to serve our static assets. We also are going to use something called DJ database URL. So this makes it easier to configure our database using one connection string. And in our development process, we've been using SQLite, but we're going to be switching that one up for Postgres because Heroku doesn't actually work well with SQLite. So since SQLite is file-based, Heroku's infrastructure doesn't really support that. So what we're going to do is set it up to use Postgres. Now, let's start here. So we need to install Django Heroku. So whenever we install Django Heroku, it's going to install white noise. It's also going to go ahead and install PythonDjango, which is a database connector for Postgres and Python. Django Heroku. Just run that command. So then the next thing we're going to need to do is in our settings.py, we want to go to settings.py. So we need to import it. So right here, we can import it. Then the next thing we're going to need to do is to add this line here to configure it to pick up the settings. So we're going to go at the end of this file and just add that line. From the documentation, it goes ahead to set up white noise. So this is going to be useful if we are going to be seeing like this CSS that is used to render this page here. So what we'll do is on the white noise documentation, we basically need to do another step, and that is to add the white noise middleware in our list of middlewares. So I'm going to copy that line there and go to the list of middlewares. So they suggest we put it after security middleware, so we can just bring it here. Just have a comma there. So now that we have that, then we can install GUnicorn, and that's going to be our server that Heroku is going to be using to serve our application. So whenever we are running Python manage.py run server, we have a local development server that Django sets up for us. But that's not suitable for production, and we just need to use another server. So basically, whenever we install GUnicorn, what we need to do is we need to tell it where our application will be and tell Heroku how it should run GUnicorn. So Heroku uses a special file called procfile. So I'm going to go in our backend folder and I'm going to create a file called procfile. So in the procfile, we're going to add this piece of code here. So the deployment goes through different phases. So here we are saying that whenever we are in the release phase, we should go ahead and run and make migrations and also migrate if we have any other new migrations that are not yet synced to the DB. And then we go ahead and add a command that Heroku should use to be able to serve our application. So for the web process, we want to run GUnicorn, then we have to point to where our WSGI file is. So if you look at in our folders here, we have this folder for CM backend, which is like the entry point to our project. And that's where our WSGI file is. That's what we want to put here in front of GUnicorn. So now that we have this one out of the way, then we need to tell Heroku about where our project dependencies would be, such that it knows how to run the project, So what we need to do is we need to create a requirements.txt file, and in there put in all the requirements that we are using in our project. Now, since we are using a virtual environment like we're using here, then we can be able to get all our dependencies by doing pip freeze. So we want to do pip freeze, and we are going to freeze into a file called requirements.txt. So requirements.txt, like this. So when we run that, you can see we have a requirements.txt file created. and that's going to contain everything every dependency that we are using in the project. So one other thing we are going to need to do before we go is we're going to switch the way we are using the secret key here. So we're going to move it away to an environment variable, and then we are going to be using an environment variable to pull it in. So we don't want to expose it since it's used for many things by Django on our application. So here, what we want to do is we want to do OS environment. So we want to pick it from an environment variable, and Heroku actually does this by default. So you just need to reference it. So Heroku actually pulls it from an environment variable by default. So we also want to make sure we are doing that. So whenever we add so we need to update our .env file. So since I'm on Mac now, then we can use export secret key equals the secret key. So I'm just going to put something here, just something random. So if you're in Windows, you want to have a .env.bat file, and that's what you want to contain your stuff. So it's going to look something like this. So on Windows, you're going to have something that looks like this. On Mac, whenever you update your environment file or your .env file, you want to update your terminal to be able to pick up those new values by running source, then the name of the file, which is .env. But on Windows, you want to call, then in your case, it's going to be env.env.bat. Like that. But that's not going to work on Mac. Anyway, so we need to also update our env sample file. Since those .env files are not going to be in version control, we want to make sure that next time we are checking out this project, we are going to need to know what we need to set up as environment variables by looking at the example file for .env. So next thing we're going to need to do is create a Git repository and push our code to Git, and then Heroku can deploy it from there. So go to GitHub, so github.com. So here, what I want to do is create a new repository. So I'm going to call this CM backend API. We're going to copy the example commands they give us here, and I'm just going to replace them. I'm just going to paste them here in backend, and that's going to create a Git repository for our backend. So the next thing we're going to need to do is create a .gitignore file, because we don't want to push the .env files and also the fetch environment files. So here, let's create a .gitignore file. So in the .gitignore, the quickest way to have a .gitignore is to use .gitignore.io. So you come here, you put in your technology. So I'm going to put in Django here. I don't know why it's using French these days. So when you put in Django, they can give you a starter for the things that a Django project shouldn't expose in version control. So when we add that, you can see like PyCache is ignored. You can see, oh, these are not ignored, I believe. So let's go ahead and ignore these two. So what is this? Oh, we need to make sure it's in the root. Yeah, so now you can see our .env is ignored, and also the PyCaches are ignored. Let's also go and ignore the .env.bat. So .env. Oh, so we are seeing this one here too. So .env.bat. Okay, and that's gonna also ignore this, as you can see. So I'm gonna actually use a branch here. So git checkout -b ch deploy. That's for the branch name. And if you wanna run git from me, be sure to leave that in the comments. I will be sure to make videos about it. But there are some videos that are already available. But if you want mine specifically, just mention that and I will be happy to create them. So git commit -m. Then we wanna say deploy project. Oh, we need to put git at first. So git that. Then let's push this to GitHub. So git push. So I need to push to this branch. So let's go on there and create a pull request. So deploy project, let's create a pull request. For now, we are just going to merge it in because really we just want to get this thing deployed. So now that we've merged it in, I'm going to copy the name there, and I'm going to go to Heroku and say create a new app. So I'm going to give it the name. Let's see if this one is available. It's not. Oh, we need to get this one away. Oh, there's a space here, sorry. Okay, so we just use this. Then we just create an app. So now to deploy, we want to go to the deploy section, then we want to click on GitHub. You can use the Heroku CLI, but using GitHub makes it easy that whenever we push code to GitHub, Heroku can go ahead and pick it up and deploy the newest code without you actually redeploying. So if you have not connected to GitHub, you're going to have a button to like connect GitHub that's going to ask you to authorize Heroku, and it's going to get your account here. Once that's done, you want to search for the project you want to connect. Then this is the one we want to connect. I'm going to click there. So we want to enable automatic deploys. So that means next time we push to GitHub, it should deploy Heroku every time we push to main on GitHub. So let's go ahead and deploy main right now. So now locally, since we used another branch, I'm going to check out the main branch. And I'm going to pull to make sure that my local main branch is the same as the remote main branch. So now we need to change our database. Instead of using SQLite, to use Postgres. So let's move down here. You see this is using SQLite, so this is what we want to change. Oh, our deployment failed here. So let's go ahead and set an environment variable that should disable correct static. So what you can do is in the settings, you want to click on reveal vars. So you want to set this, let's set it to 1. So we don't want it to collect static when it's deploying. We are going to be, everything is going to be managed by white noise. We need to retry the deployment. So let's go back down and deploy branch. Yeah, so like I was saying, we need to change our database to use Postgres, and we're going to be using DJ database URL to set that one up. But we are going to be using the Postgres database that Heroku gives us. So let's wait for Heroku to first set it up for us, and then we can use that. Also, our application ran into an error. That's because I added a code that wasn't correct. So let's go ahead and correct that. So where we said os.environ, let's see, that was funny. So I want to do .get here. So for now, I'm just going to push this to main so we can deploy quickly. Fix code, then let's push to main. So now that we've pushed, this should go ahead and start redeploying again. So if you come here and click on overview, you can see that the build is now in progress, and we didn't actually go ahead and deploy again. So it's just picked up the new changes. So let it deploy and we see where it gets to. So as it deploys, I want to also go ahead and set up this. So we want to go ahead and install it. So we want to go ahead and install it. So we want to click that. Then we want to install DJ database URL. And of course, you can use the normal way of setting up a database. So here, where is it? Yeah, so here you could come in and you change the engine and you change the database. But you're going to have to write like 5 lines of code, which I just want to avoid by using this module here. So Heroku actually uses this to configure databases. So with this module, whenever we have a connection string in as an environment variable, we only have to do this, add this line here, and it's going to pick up the connection string by default. So if we want to hard code it inside the code, then we can use this here where we say DJ database URL.pass. So basically this is going to allow us to pass the connection string itself. It's going to have some random characters. So you want to use pass to make sure that Django database URL picks it up correctly. So for us, we're going to be having it in an environment variable. So we want to have just this line here. And we're just going to put it after the databases just so we can replace this. We can replace the default one. So let's make sure we have the import. So we need to set the secret key too. So you want to go to settings and go to Reveal and set the secret key. So I'm just going to set it to secret key here. So notice how Heroku was able to set up a database URL for us. So we also want to change this. We want to go to our settings. We want to go to our .env. So like here, we want to have something like this. So use this syntax if you're in Windows. So the value for this is going to be this whole string. I'm just going to copy it and bring it here. So you can see it's very random. And that's why we need to use pass if we are going to use the pass syntax and not use an environment variable. So let's use this here, and of course we need to use export. So let's make sure our aim sample is updated. Git commit. We can say add db connection string. Let's push it. So now Heroku should try to deploy again. Let's go here. So the deployment has started. Hopefully we don't get any other issues. But just like you can see, whenever we get issues, we are still able to fix them. So let's wait to see how this one now behaves. Alright, so it looks like this one is done now. So when I click on open app, this time it's actually opening here. So you can see it opens here, and we have our API. So if you ever want to create like an admin user, so they can be able to log in and manage campaigns, you can go here in Heroku, then you want to go to run console, and here you can run command like you're running it on your Django server. So you can do python manage.py, create super user. Let's make sure our database is also linked. So create super user. Let's run that. So let's give the username. I'm just gonna put Christ Truly here. Email, I just use Christ Truly, Gmail. Password, the password that never gets old. It's too common, I'm sure. So you can see we are able to create a super user, meaning that the database is linked. So now that means we should be able to go to the admin section by doing /admin, and here we can log in. So I'm going to use the Christ Truly and my newest password. Now for you to be able to add a campaign, you're going to need certain environment variables for Cloudinary to be able to upload images. So you can go to the settings, then you want to go to config vars, which is here. Then you can add your settings here. So I'm going to go ahead and add mine, and then we can test out the addition of campaigns. So in the .env, we're going to need all this stuff. Be sure to use yours. If you use these, they won't work. That's one I promise you. So let me use this. Then this one is also test. Obviously this is just dummy. I just don't want you guys to see my credentials, but you can use yours that you can get from the your Cloudinary page. So be sure to get yours, and then you make sure you have them here. You have them set. Alright, so once you're done setting up, then you can come and test out this. So we wanna just create a simple campaign. Let's make sure we can upload. I'm gonna click up choose picture. So I'm gonna choose any picture I find close. I'll just choose mine for our app. I'll click save, and you can see it goes ahead to be created. So that means that in our API, so in our documentation, we want to make sure we can be able to fetch the one we just added, and you can see we get it. So thanks guys for watching. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe. I'll talk to you next time. Hey guys, welcome back. So let's go ahead and deploy our Next.js application to Heroku. So our application is in the front-end folder, so right here. So I'm gonna stop the server, and if we do an ls, you can see we have all our Next files. So what we need to do here is make sure this is a Git repository. So what we want to do is go to GitHub and create a repository and connect it to Heroku. So here I'm gonna create a new repository. So let's call it CM Next. I said CM Next, but I did SM Next. Who cares? Anyway, so I'm just gonna copy this text. I'm just gonna copy these default commands and just repaste them inside the frontend folder. So that's going to go ahead and push a README file here. So we want to push all the code. Now the Git project that Next.js sets up actually ignores all the env files and also these modules files and .next files. So what we want to do now is push all the code. So I'm just gonna add all of them and then push them. So git commit -m, add all code. Let me push it. So git push, and that should update on GitHub. So what we want to do in Heroku, we want to go heroku.com. You want to have an account, of course. You want to be able to log in. Then you're going to have a button to create a new app. So we're going to create a new app. This time it's going to be CM Next.js, like this. Let's create it. Create app. So once it comes, what we want to do is click GitHub on the deploy section. Then we want to connect it to GitHub. If you haven't connected your GitHub account, it's going to give you a button to connect. Then you can authorize Heroku to access your account. So once that's done, then you want to connect your repo. So I'm going to put SM, sure it's going to come up. So this is it. I'll click connect, and it's going to go ahead and give us more options where we can customize deployment here. So we want it to deploy every time we make a new change. So we want to click on enable automatic deploys. Forget the CI one, it doesn't matter so much because you're not using the Heroku CI. So then you want to deploy branch. So since this is what contains our main code, Heroku is going to be running the yarn build command. And since we want Next.js to fetch data at build time, we want to make sure that it's connecting to the right API. So here, if I run yarn build, it's going to go ahead and do some checks. So first off, you're going to see that it fails because we have an issue inside _document.js. So we want to correct it. So this is just a linting issue, JSX issue. So once you correct it, we can run again. So we're going to do yarn build. Notice that it fails because it can't make a request to the localhost. So what we want now is to update our application to point to the remote URL. Our remote URL is going to be this. So this is what we want to have now. So I'm going to go to the frontend.env and replace this. On the back end, we need to enable CORS for this front end to connect to it. We want to enable this front end to make cross-origin requests to our server. So I'm going to go and update our backend code to also accept the front end. So I'll just go to the backend, then go to the settings py where we had CORS allowed origins. We can add our new front-end URL. All right, let's move this trading slash. Now that we've updated our backend code, let's go ahead and push it to GitHub just so it deploys again, such that by the time we deploy the front end, the backend will have updated. So backend git add commit -m update CORS list. Let's push it. Okay, so that's good. So on our front end, okay, so for now we just want to make sure that our remote is up to date. So let's just do git add commit push. Okay, so now once we come back to Heroku, so let's click deploy branch again, and also let's uncheck wait for CI. So it's gonna go ahead and do a new install for dependencies. It should run yarn build. Let's wait for it. Only absolute URLs are supported. Yeah, so you can see that it failed here, and that's because we have not set an environment variable for our API. So if you go to env local, we need to set this in Heroku. So I'm gonna copy this and go to settings. Then we wanna go to key. So for the key, it's gonna be that. I'm just gonna copy the value, actually cut. So that's gonna be the key. Then the value is gonna be this one. I'll click add and go back to deploy and trigger a redeploy again. So I'll deploy branch again. Okay, so this time you can see it's finished successfully, and you can click on view. So when you click on view, you can see we have our Next.js app and it's on Heroku. You can even click here and it goes to the detail page. So now we have our static app that's built on top of Django and Next, and it's live on the live. You guys can even check out this thing. I promise you it's gonna work. So that's gonna do it for this video. So in the next one, I'm gonna be showing you guys how to set up Google Analytics with the Next.js projects, just so we can track who is visiting this app, just so I can see you guys when you try to visit that thing. Okay, yeah, so we're gonna be starting here in the next one. Thanks for watching. Subscribe. I'll talk to you later. Hey guys, welcome to the last video in the series. So in this one, we're going to be setting up Google Analytics with our Next.js application. So before we continue, I want to mention that I will be working on a full stack course that will be using Django and Next.js. So it's going to be an Instagram clone, meaning that we're going to be building everything you see in Instagram to the best of our knowledge using Django on the backend and Next.js on the front end. So if you guys would want to build that application with me, use the link below to sign up for updates on when that course will be available. Alright, so with that out of the way, let's go ahead and set up our Google Analytics. So let's create an account so we can get a tracking ID. Let's call this a tracking account. The name don't really matter. So we want to scroll down, click next. So for the properties, we want to give it a name. So I'm going to call this CM property. Then they're going to ask for business information. So what do we want to do? So here we need to accept the agreement. Let's accept. We already have enough emails, so just not check any. And right here, we want to add a data stream. So a data stream represents where you expect your users to be coming from. So ours are going to be on a web app. So for the website, we want to use our Heroku app. So I think call it like CM Next. This is it. I'm going to copy this. And wanna go to analytics, replace here. The protocol is already prepended, so we wanna keep just the domain, and we need to give it a name. So in our case, we can call this CM website. So once that's done, then we're gonna have the measurement ID. So this is what we care about. So we're gonna click this, and these instructions here, don't worry about them. So what we want to do is we want to go to our Next.js app and add this to our environment. So here we want to say next public underscore GA ID, GA measurement ID. So once we have this, then we are going to be using most of the code in the with Google Analytics example. We want to go to our custom document. And we want to add this code here. So we're actually going to be copying every piece of code we have in this example. We can paste this one there. So we need to bring in the tracking ID. We're just going to be bringing it in from the environment. So one other thing we are going to need to do is configure gtag utility. That's going to be responsible to set up a way to log an event. So an event is basically a custom action that the user performs that you would want to track maybe how many times the user clicked the login button. And also the page view. So we're gonna get this. So new folder, let's call it lib. So inside there, let's create a gtag.js. So we'll put in this code here, and instead of using the environment from the component, we are just going to export it inside the util file, inside the lib file, and use it everywhere. So let's make sure here we are exporting it as next public GA measurement ID. So now here we can use GA tracking ID, and that should add the import. That's what is being used here, and our import has been added. Good. So next thing we're going to need to do is in the app.js file, we need to basically log events on route change. So if a user goes on the home screen, we should be able to tell that they visited the home page 10 times, they visited the detail page 7 times. That kind of thing. So we're gonna put some events on the router, and we will do that inside app.js. So here, before the return, we can have this code here. We need to import router. We need to import use router. So let's add that import. Let's also add this import for gtag, because we are going to need it to basically count a page view. So here we can add this import. I'm actually going to import gtag from that. Should be the same, should be okay. One other thing is if we want to log custom events, like when a user clicks a button, we can use so you see the util we set up here for the event. So we can use this here to be able to log an event. So what we'll do is we have an example here in the code. So if you go to the contact.js file, we have this example here where we can log a custom event and maybe the data that the user entered. So here we're going to copy this very same thing, and then we want to go to where we get the successful submission, and we need to log an event. So here we'll have this here. So we'll have gtag event, submit form, category, contact, and then for the label we can log the email that was actually submitted. So we can get the email obviously from the email in our state, and that should be good. What I want to do here is actually keep the import star as. All right, and then this is what we're gonna have here. So right here, then we want to import it similarly. All right. Okay, so now that we have this, then we can go ahead and push this code to Heroku, and also update our environment in Heroku to recognize this environment file. So I'm gonna copy our environment variable and go to Heroku. I'm actually gonna save here too, and go to Heroku right here. So heroku.com. So we want to click on the Next.js app, then we need to add the environment variable. So go to settings, let's click on reveal. So right here we want to put Next.js public measurement ID for Next.js GA public measurement ID. Then the value is gonna be, so make sure you use yours, and I'm going to save. Inside app.js we need to import use effect. Okay, and now let's push again. Okay, so now the deployment is done. We have it deployed here. So I'm gonna go to the site now. So now we can go to the site by clicking open app. And if you're not using Heroku, obviously you just go to your site, but for us you just click open site, and you can see here this has opened. So I can go navigate on the site as normal. And now if you go to analytics, so you can click on reports. So I can click on reports, and I'm going to actually minimize this a bit. So when you go to reports and click on report snapshots, you can see that we have a user active, and right now I'm in Uganda, and all these details here will update as we have more users visit our website. So if I click on real time, we can see we have a user, I'm in Kampala, if you guys didn't know. And then here we can see that someone visited the homepage and then went to the detail. We can see I'm on desktop. Okay, so I'm going to be pausing the video here, guys. If there's something you want to know about Google Analytics, just Google it. I'm sure you're going to get an answer, or just ask in the comments. If I know about your question, then maybe I can answer it. So thanks guys for watching. If this video helped you, give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you in the next series. So talk then. Make sure you subscribe. Have a great one.